Hey guys, tonight we slip through wet alleys and under neon signs, following the faint footsteps of a man most people never heard speak. A man who ran the quietest criminal empire San Francisco's Chinatown ever knew. The rain is soft. The streets glisten with reflections of red paper lanterns, and somewhere beneath the rumble of distant cable cars, something is about to go very, very wrong. This is the world of Benny Ong, the silent boss of Chinatown. You probably won't survive this kind of life. One wrong gesture, a glance too long, and you'd vanish into the fog like a whisper never spoken. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Feel free to drop your location and the local time in the comments. I always love seeing where and when you're tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The rain starts light but constant, a hush against the rooftops of Chinatown in 1951. Each droplet kisses the curved tiles with a rhythm that almost masks the tension creeping beneath it. Narrow streets, strung with aging lanterns and tangled wires, shine with city neon bouncing off wet stone. Benny Ong walks alone, as always. His white dress shoes, immaculate somehow, slice quietly through puddles. His black overcoat, collar turned up, hides a frame thinner than you'd expect from someone so feared. His eyes are almond dark, deep-set, always scanning, never startled. One hand rests in his coat pocket, not on a weapon, no. Benny rarely needed one. The real blade was the silence that followed wherever he went. He passes the Hing Lung herbal shop, its windows fogged with incense and steam. The elderly owner inside glances up, makes the smallest nod, and quickly looks away. Benny doesn't respond. He never does. To the unfamiliar, Benny Ong is just another well-dressed man navigating the late hours. But those who know the undercurrent, who have lived long enough to understand that Chinatown operates on rules no one writes down, know he is more than that. He is a presence. He is a pause in conversation. He is a full sentence made of nothing but breath. Tonight, something is wrong. A red envelope should have been delivered to the Golden Lily restaurant at dusk. Inside, a coded agreement between the Wah Hentong and Benny's own unbranded faction. A truce offering turf rights over 2 gambling dens. The envelope never arrived. Worse, Benny's man sent to deliver it hasn't been seen since mid-afternoon. There's a term in Cantonese, sikse, to vanish without eating death. It means disappearing before punishment finds you. Benny doesn't believe in coincidences. When silence falls too perfectly, it often means someone else is trying to rewrite the rules. He turns down Waverly Place, where laundry lines sag overhead and old paper charms flutter from door frames. The scent of sesame oil mingles with gasoline and wet stone. A door creaks somewhere. A child coughs behind a curtain. But Benny isn't listening for sounds. He's listening for gaps, places where sound should be. He reaches the Golden Lily back door. It's ajar. No good story ever starts with an unlocked kitchen in Chinatown. Inside, it smells of char siu, pork, and bleach. The cook station is spotless. Too spotless. A single pot boils with no one nearby. Steam climbs like a warning. Benny steps in, slow. His shoes don't squeak. They never do. Past the hanging ducks, through a beaded curtain. And then he sees it. One red shoe, small, women's. It peeks out from behind a broken screen. Benny crouches, not touching, not speaking. He sees the outline of a body. It's Mei Li, one of the Golden Lily's floor girls. She isn't breathing. Her mouth is open like she was about to scream, but didn't. No blood. No struggle. Just gone. He closes his eyes. Not in grief, in calculation. A message. This wasn't just a murder. This was a gesture, sent by someone trying to be loud in Benny's world of silence. Someone breaking protocol, which in Chinatown is a sin worse than crime. Now the silence changes. Now it's loaded. Downstairs, beneath the restaurant, there's a gambling den. The kind everyone knows exists, but no one acknowledges. Mahjong clinks echo faintly. Life goes on. No one screams. No police are called. That's not how things work here. Benny doesn't descend the stairs. He leaves the way he came. Outside, the rain sharpens. He walks past the same stores, the same faces, and this time, they don't look away. They freeze. They know something has happened. Across the street, a boy selling firecrackers drops a bundle. Benny doesn't flinch. 2 storefronts down, a shadow moves. A man in a gray trench coat. American, out of place, watching. Benny doesn't acknowledge him, doesn't need to. That man will be gone by morning, one way or another. This is Chinatown's dance, always half-spoken, half-shadowed. You don't need to shout to send a message, but breaking silence is dangerous, especially with Benny Ong still alive. By the time he steps back into his office, a small, quiet room behind a tea shop near Stockton Street, his lieutenants are already waiting. No one asks what happened. Benny sits. He pours tea. Oolong, no sugar. He gestures with 2 fingers. They understand. A list is made. Not of suspects. Benny doesn't bother with that. A list of possible next moves. Some are violent. Some are public. All of them are silent. Outside, the fog thickens. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In the 1950s, San Francisco's Chinatown was under heavy watch by the Bureau of Narcotics and the Immigration and Naturalization Service. After World War II, crackdowns on gambling, immigration, and opium shifted the balance of power in Chinese American communities. But the real influence didn't rest with politicians. It rested with the ones who knew when to be silent. Many people still think Benny Ong was just a myth, a name whispered to scare kids from asking too many questions. But there are photos, fuzzy, yellowed, sometimes half-burned, where he's just barely visible at the edge of some banquet, some funeral, some courtroom. So what do you think? Was he ever really there? Or did Chinatown simply imagine the boss it needed? Either way, he was walking tonight. And the silence he carried, it was heavier than any gun. The next morning, Chinatown stirs as if nothing has happened. Vendors roll up their shop gates. Steam rises from breakfast carts hawking juk and fried crullers. The usual crowd lines up at the herbalists, hoping to find remedies for real ailments and imagined curses. Tourists meander through Grant Avenue, taking pictures of dragon sculptures and eating almond cookies from red tins. A paperboy flings folded newsprint onto stoops, the front page shouting something about a union strike down by the docks. But none of it matters, because Benny Ong hasn't spoken. And when Benny hasn't spoken, the city's silence is just a waiting room. Inside the tea shop on Stockton, the back room smells of sandalwood and dried chrysanthemum. Benny sits with his cup of oolong, untouched. He isn't alone. Across from him sits Mr. G, an elder from the Wahen Tong, his hands knotted like old driftwood, his face pale beneath a thick coat of powder meant to cover illness. Everyone knows he's dying. But today, he's here, summoned, not invited. Benny gestures once. His lieutenants leave the room and close the door. Mr. G clears his throat. I assume this isn't about dim sum. Silence. The old man sighs, shifting in his seat. You think we broke it, the truce? Still, Benny says nothing. I swear on the bones of my fathers. Benny raises a single finger. That's enough. The finger says, you've already lied once. The stare that follows says, lie again, and you'll be carried out in a basket. It's a delicate moment, this. Chinatown, for all its chaos, thrives on choreography. Even crime must be polite. But Benny, despite the calm, is rewriting the steps in real time. Mr. G swallows hard. It wasn't us. We didn't touch the girl. But someone wants us to look guilty. Someone outside, and there it is. A seed of something larger. The suggestion that the wound came not from within, but from beyond. Outside Chinatown, the worst kind of infection. There's a brief twitch at the corner of Benny's mouth. A response, not quite a smirk, not quite belief, but interest. He leans forward and pours tea for his guest, the gesture itself a small detente. G accepts it with both hands, bowing his head. There are rumors, he whispers, about a group, not Tong, not police, something else. Benny nods once, an acknowledgement, not agreement. Outside, a car backfires. Inside, no one flinches. Do you remember the day Benny crossed the ocean in silence? That boy who hid below deck, who faked sleep while men shouted over crates and diesel engines? That same boy learned early that fear isn't just a reaction. It's a resource. You bank it. You store it. And when needed, you spend it like currency. Back then, Chinatown was fractured. Post-war scars had barely healed. Many Chinese-American veterans came home with medals and trauma. The community was shifting. American-born Chinese were carving out their own identity, while the old guard clung to the language of empire, of dynasty, of family names engraved on bamboo slips. Benny straddled both. His quietness let him drift between generations. He didn't interrupt. He didn't demand. He just listened. And people, foolishly, told him everything. In the 1940s, that listening made him useful. Now, in the 1950s, it made him lethal. By noon, word had spread through Chinatown. Not about the murder. There's no body, remember? Not officially, but about the silence. That Benny hadn't spoken. That he'd poured tea for a man who should have been dead by now. That his white shoes had no mud on them after last night's rain. That last one? Probably made up. But the myth matters more than the fact. By early afternoon, a boy arrives at the tea shop. He can't be more than 12. Scruffy, pants too big, shoes held together with tape. He hands a folded napkin to the shop girl. Says nothing. Leaves. The napkin is delivered to Benny. Inside, 2 words, written in chicken scratch Cantonese. Gum Moon, the golden gate for women. Once a rescue house. Now something else. Gum Moon had long been the subject of whispered stories. Built in the early 20th century to house trafficked women and orphans, it had evolved, some said devolved, into a halfway house run by foreign charities. But over the years, it had also become a strange borderland, a place where girls could disappear, and no one, not even the Tongs, asked questions. Benny folds the note once, places it in his jacket, stands. He doesn't speak, but everyone understands. A car is waiting outside, a long black Packard with worn leather seats and one mirror cracked like a spider web. His driver, Ming, is a man of few smiles and fewer questions. They drive in silence. San Francisco passes in a blur of color and soot. Italian delis, Irish bars, Japanese grocery stalls making a slow comeback post-internment. Benny sees it all, but his expression doesn't change. Near California Street, they stop outside the nondescript brownstone that is Gum Moon. The stairs creak. The door opens before they knock. A woman in a pink cardigan greets them. Chinese American. probably raised in Oakland, voice flat with practiced kindness. "Can I help you, sir?" Benny nods once, eyes scanning the interior. She hesitates. You can't just..." He steps inside. Inside, the air smells like starch, floor wax, and tears long since dried. There's an old piano against one wall, a Bible open on a desk, children's shoes lined up near the door, smaller than any feet in the house. Benny walks slowly, his shoes clicking on the hardwood. Second floor, third door. He opens it. There's a girl inside, no more than 17. Eyes wide, shoulders tense, holding something under the blanket. A camera. It's Elsie Wong, not the journalist. Not yet. Just a runaway with a lens, an attitude, and a bad habit of getting close to danger. They stare at each other. She lowers the camera. He lowers his gaze to the footlocker beside her bed. A red envelope. It's unopened. Elsie speaks first. "I didn't steal it. I found it. She dropped it." He doesn't respond. "She was scared," Elsie adds. "Said someone was following her. Said it wasn't from here. Said it was something new." Benny kneels by the footlocker. He opens it. Inside, under the envelope, are photos. Grainy, black and white. Some of people Benny knows. Some he doesn't. One photo shows a man with a shaved head standing next to a white Cadillac with out-of-state plates. Elsie whispers, "I think they're from New York. Mainstream historical fact time." By the early 1950s, organized crime families from the East Coast had begun exploring opportunities on the West Coast, mostly through narcotics routes and gambling operations. Chinatown was small, but strategically important, and dangerous to intrude upon. Many people still think Chinatown ran itself like a closed ecosystem, self-contained, resistant to outside crime. But what if that wasn't entirely true? What if someone let outsiders in? So what do you think? Did Benny see this moment coming? Or was even the silent boss blindsided? He stands finally and nods to Elsie. Not a thank you, a warning. She gets it. The girl with the camera will live. For now. But something just shifted in the quiet, and Benny Ong is already rewriting the rules. The first sound Benny hears the next morning is a kettle whistling. It's not his. Down the hall from his apartment, 3 stories above the tea shop, past a rusted fire escape and a sleeping cat, a widow named Mrs. Leon boils tea at 6 a.m. every day without fail. The sound pierces the fog, high and sharp like a warning cry. To most, it's just a morning ritual. To Benny, it's an alarm clock disguised as domestic life. He never sets one. He rises, brushes lint from his white shirt, and moves with the same silent precision he's had for years. His movements are deliberate, economical, the way someone might behave if they knew their every gesture was being recorded, even when alone. There's no mirror in his apartment. He doesn't need one. The sun fights to pierce through the coastal fog, but fails. Gray light bleeds through the lace curtains. Down below, the neighborhood begins its routine. The butcher sharpens his cleaver. The newspaper man curses a flat tire, and kids in short pants toss pebbles at a street lamp until it gives in with a soft flicker. But Benny Ong's mind is somewhere else. 4 decades and half a world away. Before the silence, there was noise. Guangzhou, 1921. He is 8 years old and the world is on fire. Warlord armies clash outside his family's dried goods store. Soldiers break windows looking for opium or rice or women, and sometimes all 3. His father is a proud man, too proud. One afternoon, he slaps a soldier who spits on his mother. The soldier does not slap back. He pulls a pistol from his waistband and shoots Benny's father in the face, right there, between the shelves of dried mushrooms and salted fish. Benny does not scream. His mother does. His younger sister does. Benny just watches. That's the first silence. From then on, something inside him begins to close, like shutters over windows. One by one, His uncle, an opportunist with connections to both the nationalists and the triads, arranges safe passage to Hong Kong. There, Benny scrubs floors in a noodle shop, watches, learns, doesn't speak unless spoken to. He earns a ticket to America through a cousin's forged papers. The price? Everything. In 1930, he boards a cargo ship with nothing but a carved ivory pendant and a name that isn't his. The voyage is 3 weeks of damp misery, rats, and broken Cantonese prayers whispered into the waves. He sleeps near the engines and pretends not to hear the screams from the storage deck. Girls, mostly, promised jobs that don't exist. He says nothing. One of the crew members, an older man with opium on his breath, watches him closely. "You don't talk," the man says. "That's good. Talkers drown fast." Benny never forgets that. When they reach Angel Island, the Ellis Island of the West for Chinese immigrants, he's pulled into a holding cell, interrogated, asked the same questions in 5 different ways. What's your father's name? Why are you here? What year was your mother born? He answers in monosyllables, always the same tone, always one breath behind. They suspect he's lying, but they can't prove it. They let him in. San Francisco is a gray blur when he first steps out. Cold. Not like Guangdong. He is told to smile. He does not. Instead, he is sent to live with relatives, a distant family he's never met, above a laundromat on Clay Street. His first job? Pressing shirts by hand, hours on end, steam burning his fingers, starch dust clinging to his lungs. Other boys cry. Some quit. Benny endures. He memorizes the names of every customer, their collars, their tells. Mr. Chu tips when his cuffs are starched just right. Mrs. Fong leaves extra change on Fridays but glares if spoken to. Information, Benny learns, is cleaner than cash. It folds easier. At night, he delivers shirts, then papers, then packages, sealed, unmarked, often warm to the touch. He never asks. One day, a man in a silk jacket hands him a red envelope and tells him, "You're quiet. That's rare. Use it." That man is Lei Manchung, lieutenant for the Yeontong. Benny is 13. By 16, he's making twice what the other runners earn. He doesn't smoke, doesn't gamble, doesn't even drink soy milk. Just works, watches, waits. Then comes 1939. War in China. Fear in America. The community turns inward. Anti-Chinese sentiment spikes, even as America needs China as an ally. Chinatown tightens its circle. New laws, new suspicions. And Benny? He thrives. He starts wearing white, not ivory or cream or beige. White suits, always pressed, always spotless. No one knows where he gets them. People say he wears white because he wants his enemies to see him coming. Others say it's a joke. White is for funerals in Chinese tradition, but many believe it's something else, that Benny wears white to show that he can afford to ruin it, and never does. By 1947, he owns partial stakes in 3 herbal shops, a dry goods store, and a restaurant that only opens after midnight. But he isn't flashy. He doesn't attend banquets, doesn't pose for photos. No one remembers hearing his voice more than twice in a week. And when a knife fight breaks out between 2 rival runners on Grand Avenue, Benny doesn't run. He steps between them, stares. They both stop. Just stop. And that's the beginning of the legend of the silent boss. Mainstream historical fact. In the post-WMT years, San Francisco's Chinese community was one of the largest in America, but it was also one of the most surveilled. Immigration raids were common. The confession program, starting in the 1950s, coerced Chinese immigrants to admit to fraudulent papers in exchange for supposed leniency. This program fractured many families and Tong alliances. Many people still think Benny Ong cooperated with immigration authorities to keep his name clean. but others argue he never spoke to anyone. He just knew how to make the problem disappear. So what do you think? Can silence be a shield? Or was it the perfect lie? Back in the present, Benny rises from his chair. His tea's gone cold. He pours it out. Time to move again. There are whispers to trace, a photographer to protect, and a war that may have already started. But first, a visit to the Golden Dragon, and a man who owes Benny his life. By evening, the city glows like a dying coal. Chinatown, tucked between Nob Hill and the financial district, pulses with its own secret rhythm. Dim sum kitchens still steaming, tourists window shopping jade pendants, grandmothers peeling garlic at stoops. But beneath the lanterns, there's tension. A soft kind of violence hums under the surface. Benny Ong stands at the corner of Washington and Grant, where the air smells of Five Spice and fresh cigarette ash. The Golden Dragon restaurant towers above him in gold filigree and red columns, a gaudy monument to success and survival. Inside, behind closed curtains and thick glass, decisions are made. Usually, without him. Tonight, that changes. He adjusts his white cuffs, steps through the ornate doors, and vanishes into velvet. The hostess sees him and immediately averts her eyes. She presses a button beneath the podium. No words. Within seconds, a narrow elevator opens at the rear of the hallway. Not for tourists, not even for most tongs. Only a few know it exists. It takes Benny to the 4th floor. An opulent lair of carved dragons, lacquered mahogany, and carpet so thick you don't hear your own steps. At the far end, behind a folding silk screen painted with koi, waits a man with a jade ring and a nervous tick. His name is Chung Man-fai, Fat Chung, to the streets, vice chairman of the Sing Ye Tong, and he owes Benny Ong more than one favor. Benny steps into the room. No handshakes, no greetings, just quiet. Fat Chung clears his throat, pouring rice wine into 2 porcelain cups. He speaks first, which is risky. Word is you've had a delivery go missing. No response. Chung tries again. Word is you're blaming the Wah Hen. You shouldn't. Still silence. But that's not why you're here, Chung says carefully. You want to know who's moving east. Now Benny nods, barely. Chung leans in, voice dropping low. Something's changed. The New Yorkers, they're not just testing waters anymore. They've got someone local, Chinese, real low level. You'd never know his name, but he's got muscle. Where? Benny asks softly. One word, and it cuts deeper than any knife. Chung swallows. North Beach, near Columbus. They're playing small for now. Rented rooms, numbers, backroom poker. But they're recruiting. Chinatown boys. The worst kind of betrayal. Local blood, foreign leash. Benny picks up the porcelain cup. Doesn't drink. Just sets it down again. It's enough. Chung exhales in relief. But then Benny lifts his eyes, and Chung's smile dies, because what Benny sees isn't relief. It's calculation. Chung doesn't just know the New York players. He's testing the wind, choosing sides. Let me be clear, Chung offers. I'm not involved. I just hear things. Another pause. Benny says nothing. Then, no more recruiting. 2 more words. Chung blinks. They'll go elsewhere. No more recruiting, Benny repeats, almost like a whisper cast in iron. And then he turns and walks out. No threat, no raised voice. But the message lands like thunder. Downstairs, Benny exits the Golden Dragon just as a city bus roars past. The noise drowns out the sound of the call behind him. Chung, shouting to someone through a rotary phone, panicked. It doesn't matter. The game has changed. Do you remember the crewman who told Benny, "Talkers drown fast"? That same philosophy has shaped every step of his rise. And tonight, that quiet has started to turn into a storm. Back in his Packard, Benny gives a subtle nod. Ming turns west toward North Beach. They pass Columbus Avenue, where Italian cafes glow warmly in the windows and jazz spills from upstairs bars. At first glance, the area is clean, safe. But in the cracks, between the alleyways and fire escapes, something newer is taking root. They park near a bakery. Benny steps out. No suit this time. Just a gray wool coat and a knit cap. He walks down the alley behind the bakery, past graffiti, past broken crates, past the rusted-out husk of a jukebox dumped in a puddle. There, under a flickering security light, is a side door. It's unmarked, but inside is a backroom poker game, one the New York mob has started to call the feeder. The door guard doesn't recognize Benny. Big mistake. He blocks the way. Private game. Benny simply looks at him, and then, so slowly it's like watching water freeze, he steps forward, close enough for the guard to see the color of his eyes. Something shifts. The guard's breath catches. Instinct, maybe. Memory. A story passed down. He steps aside. Inside, the room smells like cigarette ash, sweat, and cheap cologne. 4 tables, 10 men. Money piles high. A record player hums a scratchy mambo. Nobody looks up until Benny does nothing more than close the door behind him. Silence falls like a knife. A man in a camel coat rises slowly, tall, Slavic features, hair slicked back, Brooklyn accent under West Coast slang. His name is Vincent Vinny Slice Caruso. He's not Chinese, but he's here, and he's smiling. "I know you," he says, pointing with a half-smoked cigar. "You're the mute boss, right? Benny?" "Something." "Christ, I didn't think you were real." Benny doesn't answer. He steps forward. Vinny doesn't move. "You don't talk, I hear. Just stare people to death." Someone chuckles from the back. Then Benny reaches into his coat pocket. The room stiffens, but he doesn't pull out a gun. He pulls out a red envelope. Silent, crisp. He tosses it onto the poker table. It slides across the green, felt like a threat dressed in silk. Vinny stares at it, laughs. "What is this? A Chinese Christmas card?" He opens it. Inside, a single slip of paper. On it, written in English, "1 week, then you leave." Vinny's laugh fades. "That a threat?" he asks. But his voice has changed. Benny just watches him. That's when Vinny sees it. Really sees it. The room. The silence. The tension. And the 4 Chinese men who were dealing cards. They're no longer seated. They're standing. Eyes locked on him. It's no longer a poker game. It's a warning. Benny turns and leaves. No one stops him. Mainstream historical fact. In the 1950s, the Italian-American mafia actively sought alliances with Asian crime syndicates along the West Coast, hoping to tap into the heroin trade routes coming through Hong Kong and Saigon. San Francisco, being both a port city and a cultural crossroads, became a hotbed for quiet negotiations and loud mistakes. Many people still think Benny Ong was just a myth, that no one Chinese boss could stand down a mafia crew without ever pulling a trigger. But the FBI reports, redacted though they are, tell a different story. And somewhere in a drawer in New Jersey, there's a file labeled Subject Ong Benjamin. So what do you think? Did he really make them leave? Or did they just choose not to stay? Either way, the red envelope sits there still. Vinny Slice holding it like it might catch fire. Because Benny Ong doesn't bluff, and he never needs to raise his voice. 2 days later, Chinatown resumes its rhythm. But if you listen closely, really listen, something has shifted. The vendors still shout. The clatter of dim sum carts still echoes down Jackson Street. But beneath the noise, the silence surrounding Benny Ong begins to spread. It's a contagious quiet, and it moves faster than gossip. A hush in doorways, a pause between transactions. Even the sparrows nesting near the tin roofs seem more cautious, because everyone knows. Benny visited North Beach, and Benny came back. He always does, but not everyone returned. Vinny Slice Caruso is gone. No one sees him leave. No bags, no car. 1 minute he's in town, leaning over poker tables and flashing that oily grin, and the next, he's just not. Rumors say he took a train south. Others say he went east with a busted jaw and an apology stitched into his chest. Some swear he was offered a choice: leave or become a permanent part of the Bay. No one asks Benny. No one needs to. He returns to his routine. Morning tea. Walks through fog. No meetings unless necessary. He visits the apothecary, the bookshop, the temple on Waverly. People bow, offer free buns, free haircuts. He accepts none of it. He pays with exact change. Always. But something lingers. Not fear. Respect. That old kind. The kind you don't name because naming it would make it too familiar. Do you remember the first red envelope? The one that never made it? It had a name inside. A name no one said aloud. Until now. Inside a basement, 2 floors beneath a pawn shop on Spofford Alley, Benny meets his oldest lieutenant, Locke. White hair, white gloves, and a soft limp from a bullet wound he never talks about. Locke, Benny says. Just the name, it's enough. Locke nods and reaches into a cabinet. He pulls out a file wrapped in oilcloth. Carefully, reverently, he lays it on the table. Inside, grainy photographs, handwritten notes in Cantonese and English, and 1 copy of a draft letter never sent. The name, Liu Pa Kung. Once a runner, now a ghost, he was the one carrying the original envelope. The one who vanished. And now finally, Benny knows why. Liu had been approached by the New Yorkers, yes, but also someone closer. A third party, Chinese, smart, independent, and ambitious in a way Benny finds dangerous. He's calling himself Wu, Locke says. Just Wu. No title, no tong, no family. A name like smoke. Hard to catch, harder to pin. He's trying to recruit from inside, Locke adds. Not for outside money, not for the Italians, for something else, something new. This isn't a power grab. It's a rebellion, and Benny doesn't like revolutions. He leaves the basement without another word. By nightfall, he's walking down Clay Street, where shadows bleed across the sidewalk and the air smells of garlic and gun oil. A teenage boy runs past him, drops a comic book, picks it up, stutters an apology, and stares too long at Benny's white shoes. The kid freezes. Benny keeps walking. Moments like that, they say more than any bullet. At the edge of Chinatown, past a shuttered bathhouse and a church with broken stained glass, sits a building few dare enter after dark. The House of Jade. Once a brothel, then a theater, now something else. Everyone knows it's Benny's. No one says it. He enters through the back. Inside, dim lights reveal old velvet curtains and dust on dragon carvings. A young woman greets him with a bow. He nods. Nothing more. In a locked room behind the stage, under the faded scent of perfume and incense, is the box. Not many know about the box. It's Benny's archive. Not police records, not blackmail, memories. Inside, old photographs, sealed letters, coins from his first job, scraps of silk from his mother's wedding dress. And beneath all that, documents, maps, names. He opens a drawer labeled Ghost Hands. Inside are files on every man and woman who ever served him and vanished. Most by choice, some by force. Liu Pa Kyung's file is there. But now, Benny adds another. Wu. Still barely a whisper. No face. No known address. But a trail. And Benny, he doesn't chase. He waits. Because eventually, if you build something in Chinatown, you have to pass through his silence. He just has to listen for it. Mainstream historical fact. In the 1950s, San Francisco's Chinatown faced enormous scrutiny from both federal immigration officers and organized crime task forces. Many traditional Tong alliances began to fracture under pressure. giving rise to newer, more fragmented factions. These small groups often formed without historic family lines, leading to increased internal surveillance and suspicion. Many people still think that Wu was just a fabrication, an invented enemy to unify Benny's faction under one banner. But others argue Wu was real, a ghost in the system, someone who believed Chinatown didn't need a silent boss, just a louder future. So what do you think? Did Benny invent his enemy, or was he finally facing a younger version of himself? Only this one refused to stay quiet. Either way, the war hadn't started yet, but the silence before it was deafening. The next morning, fog blankets the city like wet gauze. San Francisco wakes slowly, yawning through its hills and alleys. In Chinatown, the world moves with practiced precision. Dim sum carts roll out, shutters creak open. Laundry flaps above the streets like surrender flags that no one ever lowers. And somewhere behind a curtain of incense smoke, Benny Yong is preparing to be reborn. Not literally, but something inside him has begun to shift. Because now he knows the rules are changing, and not by his hand. He walks alone down Stockton Street, head lowered, coat buttoned to the throat. The only sound is the tap of his polished shoes and the occasional whisper of a bamboo broom against wet stone. Today he's going to Golden Dragon, but not for confrontation. He's going for presence. You see, Benny doesn't storm into rooms. He appears, like a gust of cold air or the smell of rain before it hits. And presence, in his world, is more powerful than any threat. Inside the Golden Dragon, the noon banquet has just begun. Tables are full. Elders sip tea and swap ghost stories. Young men pour drinks and pretend not to look at Benny as he glides past. A girl plays the air hu in a corner. A child coughs. Dumplings steam. Benny doesn't eat. He doesn't sit. He stands at the center of the room and says nothing. It takes 10 minutes for the entire floor to go quiet. A spoon drops. A man halfway through a joke lowers his voice. Someone whispers, "He's here." And then, finally, the boss of the Hua Hen Tong arrives, Mr. Tien. Old, brittle, full of noise and ceremonial greetings. He bows, speaks in florid tones, tries to spin his words like silk scarves in a marketplace. "Brother Ong," he says, "what an honor. You grace us. May the winds favor your house." Benny raises one hand. That's enough. Tien stops. Everyone watches. Benny steps forward and sets a single folded napkin on the lazy Susan. Red paper, sealed in wax. The old way. The Tong way. Then he nods once, turns, and walks out. The silence that follows is louder than any applause. What was in that note? No one knows. But before nightfall, half the gambling dens in Chinatown voluntarily close for repairs. At least 3 runners disappear. 2 shift allegiance. One is found floating face down in the harbor, his pockets stuffed with paper scraps that read, "Ask before you act." No one claims responsibility. They never do. Back in his private office, Benny sits by the open window. The air smells of dried chrysanthemum, ink, and old paint. He watches a pigeon hop across the sill. Across the street, a boy tries to fly a kite between telephone wires. He fails. The kite crashes. The boy laughs anyway. Benny doesn't. Locke enters, holding a photo. Wu. The man in the photo is young. Mid-20s. Hair slicked back. Narrow face. Sharp jawline. The kind of face that looks forgettable. Until it isn't. He's standing in front of a Cantonese opera house, smiling. Benny studies it for a long time. Opera? Used to work backstage, Alok explains. Lighting crew, then backstage loans, then bribes, the usual. Benny nods. He's starting to understand. Wu isn't building a tong. He's building a stage. A place where silence will no longer rule, where presence can't just appear, but must be announced. This isn't a turf war, it's an ideology. Wu wants to be heard. Benny writes a name on a piece of paper, hands it to Locke. No words. Locke nods and leaves. Later that night, the opera house burns. It's quiet, controlled, professional. No one inside. No one hurt. But the message is clear. No more stages. Do you remember Benny's first job pressing shirts? The weight of the iron, the hiss of steam, the need for absolute precision. No mistakes, no wrinkles. That same principle applies here. Control the surface. Hide the burn marks beneath the starch. The next morning, Benny visits the Golden Lily, not the restaurant, its basement. Here, beneath the garlic and gossip, is a meeting place. No name, no rules, just red velvet chairs and too much cigarette smoke. It's where Chinatown's old guard meets to argue in whispers and drink tea so strong it stains the cup forever. Benny enters, sits. No one speaks for a full minute. Finally, someone clears their throat. An elder named Mrs. Fang, who once ran half the protection rackets on Pacific Avenue with nothing but a cane and a prayer. "You've stirred the water, Ong," she says. Benny looks at her. That's not always wise. He lifts his teacup. "I liked the opera house," she adds almost wistfully. He drinks. There's no threat here, just a warning dressed as nostalgia. But everyone in the room hears it. They talk, or rather, around him. About Wu. About the boys he's recruiting. Young, brash, hungry. They don't remember the raids, the curfews, the old wars. They want to tweet like birds. And Benny? He's the cat waiting under the windowsill. One man, younger, bolder, dares to ask, "What if you let him build? What if we allow a new order?" Benny doesn't blink. Instead, he stands, smooths his coat, and before he leaves, he places a folded opera program on the table. On the cover, Wu smiling, arms open. Across it, in thick black ink, he's written one word: closed. Mainstream historical fact. Cantonese opera houses in mid-century San Francisco were more than cultural venues. They were often coded meeting places for tongs, families, and criminal enterprises. They served as social anchors for new immigrants, and occasionally staging grounds for power. Many people still think Benny's destruction of Wu's opera house was just a warning, but others argue it was a declaration of war. That in Chinatown, to burn a stage was to erase a voice. So what do you think? Was Benny silencing a threat, or silencing a generation? Either way, the flame has been lit. And for once, it isn't quiet. The rain returns. Not heavy. Just a thin mist that turns rooftops into watercolor and street signs into smudges. Chinatown glistens in gray, and people move with umbrellas like petals, blooming and closing between awnings and temple gates. Inside a mahjong parlor on Spofford Alley, the tiles clack gently. Old men sip hot soy milk, lean in to squint at the table, and try to ignore the obvious. There are fewer tables than last week. A few chairs sit empty. Permanently. Benny Ong walks past without stopping. He doesn't need to be there to know what was said. He turns down Hang Ah Alley. It's always been narrow, always been dark. A place where truths are traded like dumplings, cheap, fast, and hot enough to burn. Halfway down, a boy steps into his path. 14, maybe. Skinny. Scar on his cheek. His name is Ming Tso, but everyone calls him Tofu, a street nickname from when he couldn't stop crying over a spilled lunchbox. He doesn't cry now. He stands, shaking, holding out an envelope with both hands. His palms sweat through the paper. Benny takes it, doesn't open it, just looks at him. The boy swallows hard. I didn't know who he was. Honest. He just said to give it to you. Said you'd understand. No reply. Tofu glances down the alley, as if someone might be watching. Someone probably is. He said you're too old, that you don't know how fast things move now. Benny tilts his head slightly, not in anger, in study. Then he steps forward. Tofu flinches, but Benny just places a hand on the boy's shoulder. Not hard, not threatening, just a gesture, then walks on. Later, that boy will leave Chinatown. Some say he joined the Navy. Others say Benny sent him to Macau with a one-way ticket and a job in a casino. All anyone knows for sure. Tofu never saw Wu again. Back in his office, Benny opens the envelope. Inside, a photograph. Grainy. Black and white. Wu, standing next to a police officer, smiling. And below it, a single line scrawled in messy Cantonese. Some alliances are louder than others. It's not a threat. It's bait. And Benny? He rarely takes bait. But this is different because corruption in Chinatown isn't new. Payoffs happen. Bribes vanish in fortune cookies. But public police alliances? That's something else. That's theater. That's dangerous. Benny walks to the window and watches the city breathe. The fog is lifting, so he calls for Alok. They need to talk about the unwritten laws. Do you remember the first rule Benny learned as a boy pressing shirts? The crease always faces out. Not because it matters, but because it shows you know the difference. In Chinatown, that same principle applies. The true rules are the ones no one speaks aloud, but everyone follows. Alok arrives with a cane and a box. Inside the box, a single document. It's not official. It's not even dated, but it's been passed down since the 1920s. A handwritten list of 10 principles used by the earliest Tong negotiators in San Francisco. Not laws, not commandments. Spoils and silence. That's what they called them. 10 rules. Here's a taste. Never take what you cannot return. No deal lasts longer than silence. Children are never touched. Not even in rumor. If you raise your voice, you've already lost. And the final one. Anyone who breaks the above must answer at midnight, under the Dragon Gate, alone. Simple, elegant, merciless. And Wu has already broken 3. The question is, does he know? Or worse, does he care? At midnight, Benny walks alone to the Dragon Gate at Bush Street. He wears a dark suit. Not white tonight. Not for this. The rain taps gently on the asphalt. Steam curls up from sewer grates. The occasional car passes, headlights throwing shadows onto the green stone lions. Benny stands at the center, hands clasped behind his back, waiting. He does this once a year. A ritual, some say. Others claim it's when he meets with ghosts. Lieutenants long buried, debts long paid. A superstition? Maybe. But tonight, someone joins him. From the shadows, a figure, slim, confident. Wu, no guards, no backup, just presence. He steps into the light and smiles like a man who thinks he has already won. You still do this? He says, voice smooth. Meet your ancestors? See any of them lately? Benny doesn't answer. Wu walks a slow circle around him, hands in pockets. You burned my opera house, he says. I didn't think you had it in you. Still no reply. Wu stops in front of him. Do you know what your silence costs this place? What your traditions really do? They keep us small, hidden, quiet. That worked for you. It doesn't work now. A pause. Then finally Benny speaks. You talk too much. 3 words, spoken like steel. Wu blinks. I'm building something, he says, more defensive now. Not a gang, a future. Benny nods once, then pulls a folded red paper from his coat and hands it to Wu. Wu opens it. 10 rules, unwritten, but written now. And at the bottom, a signature in ink. Ong. Nothing else. Wu stares. You want me to follow this? Benny meets his eyes. Or leave. There's no threat, just inevitability. Mainstream historical fact. Chinatown's invisible governance, informal systems of control outside law enforcement, have shaped the district's survival for over a century. Tongs, family associations, and even restaurant syndicates all worked on spoken pacts, not paper. These systems were essential in resisting systemic discrimination while preserving community integrity. Many people still think Benny Ong wasn't powerful because of wealth or violence, but because he preserved these invisible systems through discipline, silence, and ritual. Others argue he stifled progress, refusing to modernize Chinatown's voice when it needed it most. So what do you think? Is silence tradition or tyranny? And when someone like Wu breaks it, is he challenging power or just being loud? Either way, the rules are no longer unwritten. They're folded neatly in red paper and handed out like warnings. The next morning, the city wakes to whispers. No blood has been spilled, no arrests made. But everyone feels it, like static clinging to the edge of the air. Something invisible passed through Chinatown last night, and it left the curtains swaying. At the Phoenix Cafe, 2 delivery boys argue over who saw Benny Ong under the Dragon Gate. One claims Wu bowed. The other says he spat at Benny's shoes. Both stories are probably wrong, but the point isn't what happened. It's that something did, and now Chinatown waits. But Benny? Benny doesn't wait. He listens. And what he hears is movement. Small, intentional movement. He gathers with his closest circle that evening at a small, rarely used room above a funeral parlor. Not for the atmosphere, for the anonymity. The room smells of camphor and faded chrysanthemums. Black and white portraits line the walls. Dead men with unsmiling eyes. Ah Lok arrives first, followed by Mui Fong, the old smuggler with fingers like piano keys. Then there's Raymond Say, who launders Benny's money through 5 businesses and hasn't touched a gambling table since he was 12. And finally, Ping, the only woman in the room. She doesn't say much, but she sees everything, including what's coming. Benny enters last. He stands at the end of the table and places a small jade lion figurine in the center. It's chipped at the paw. No one touches it. That lion has only ever appeared 4 times. Each time it meant one thing, a vote. Without a word, Benny places 3 cards beside it, each marked with a single character in black ink. Buy, close it. Guy, change it. Jan, fight it. He steps back. Each person steps forward, silently, to make their choice. One by one, they place their hand over a card. 3 go to change. 1 to fight. Ah Lok, as always, chooses close. Then they wait. Benny doesn't cast a vote. He simply picks up the jade lion and walks out. Decision made. Do you remember when Benny first poured tea for the Hua Hen elders? That gesture, quiet and deliberate, changed the landscape without ever naming what was built. This is the same thing, because Benny isn't interested in erasing Wu. He's going to absorb him. The next day, construction begins on a small storefront at the edge of Chinatown. It used to be a closed-down acupuncturist's office. Now, it has new windows, new lettering, and a fresh red awning that reads, Harmony House, Cultural Resource Center. Inside, it's exactly what it says on the surface. Community classes, translation services, book donations, a calendar of performances. Lanterns hang from the ceiling. A bulletin board lists workshops on immigration law and ESL tutoring. But behind the back wall, there's another room, paper-thin, soundproofed, with 6 chairs and no windows. That's where the real work begins. Wu hears about Harmony House within 48 hours. He visits it himself on the 3rd day, disguised in a windbreaker and sunglasses. He doesn't speak to anyone, just walks through, eyes scanning every detail. He leaves with a neutral face, but his heart pounding, because Benny didn't declare war. He built infrastructure. He turned Wu's idea, youth, energy, outreach, into something his own. And he did it faster. Wu's boys begin to waver. A few defect. One of them, a tall runner with a dragon tattoo across his neck, is seen passing out Harmony House flyers the next week. No one says it, but everyone knows. This is how Benny fights. Not with knives, but with gravity. He doesn't push. He pulls. One night, weeks later, Wu leaves a coded message at the door of the Golden Lily. It contains only 6 characters. 清水深流. Still waters run deep, a proverb. But Benny doesn't need a translator. He smiles ever so slightly. Wu has acknowledged him, not with surrender, but with respect. And that's a beginning, not an ending. Mainstream historical fact. Community centers in mid-century Chinatown often doubled as unofficial political hubs. Under the guise of cultural programming, they offered protection networks, employment pipelines, and even coded systems for dispute resolution. These institutions, rarely documented, played a crucial role in Chinatown's autonomy and resilience. Many people still think Benny Ong's Harmony House never existed, that it was a metaphor or a sanitized myth later created to explain how he regained control without open conflict. But a single photo survives. Benny, in a gray coat, standing in front of a red awning, hands folded behind his back. So, what do you think? Was Harmony House real? Or just another piece of Benny's quiet theater? Either way, Wu didn't bow, and Benny didn't order blood. Instead, they built the rarest thing in Chinatown, a truce made of silence. Night falls soft on San Francisco. A marine layer drapes over the hills, thickening the air until every lantern glow blurs at the edges. Chinatown settles into its usual rhythm. Restaurants full, apartment windows dim, the hum of fans spinning through 100 cracked panes. But tonight, something different stirs beneath the hum. There is a death, and no one knows what to make of it. At dawn, the news spreads through the alleys like steam. A Tong boss, middle-aged, name irrelevant, found dead in his apartment. No signs of struggle, no wounds, just a man in his undershirt, tea cooling beside him, and his eyes open wide, staring at the ceiling like he saw something he didn't understand. Police call it natural causes. No one believes them, because beside his body was a single red envelope, empty. In his office above the tea shop, Benny Ong receives the news with stillness. He's not surprised, nor is he mourning. This man, Chin Hao, had been loyal to no one. A Tong affiliate without direction. Too proud to pledge to Wu. Too slippery to commit to Benny. He'd once called himself a free agent, which in Chinatown means soon to vanish. Still, the message is loud, louder than Benny likes. A red envelope without content? That's not tradition. That's not ritual. That's mockery. Someone wants the rules broken. Someone wants the quiet undone. Do you remember the corpse by the Dragon Gate? The one left without a face or name? That wasn't murder. That was punctuation. But this is something else. This is a test. Benny calls a meeting, not of his usual circle, but of observers. These are people who never sit at his table, but they see everything. There's the florist who delivers arrangements to half the funeral homes in the city, the seamstress who hems every Tong leader's trousers, the man who repairs gold teeth in the back of a jewelry shop, and a blind beggar who's been stationed outside the Tin Hao Temple for 20 years. They meet in a narrow room behind an herbalist's, surrounded by jars of dried seahorses and ginseng roots older than most of the men in the room. Benny listens. The florist says she saw someone leave Chin Hao's apartment 2 nights ago. Not Wu, not any of his known men. Someone new, tall, American clothes, no accent. Could pass as Chinese American, but with something off. The blind beggar speaks next, his voice like dust over old paper. They call him Daniel. The room stills. Daniel, not a name you hear in Chinatown, not from someone with power. The beggar continues. He wears a suit, no hat, carries a pen more than a gun, talks like a banker. But when he walks, the rats run. No one laughs, because Benny already knows the name, Daniel Lim. Flashback, Shanghai, 1946. The war is over. The city is chaos. American troops patrol the Bund, while local gangs claw at each other in the ruins. Benny walks those streets once, on business, a retrieval. That's where he meets Daniel. Not a gangster, not a soldier, a broker. Daniel arranged shipments, money, people, promises. He spoke 5 languages and none of them with warmth. He'd once said to Benny, "The future isn't in knives, it's in contracts." Benny didn't like him. Too loud, too clean. But he never forgot him. Back in present-day San Francisco, Benny visits an old photo studio on Powell Street. He hands the shopkeeper a small photo. "Run it." The shopkeeper vanishes into the back and returns with a grainy print. Daniel Lim, now older, now sharper, now here. He's in the background of a recent banquet photo, standing beside Wu. So, there it is. Wu has partnered with a man who doesn't follow rules, doesn't respect traditions, and doesn't even live in Chinatown. This isn't just rebellion anymore. It's outsourcing. The next move is dangerous, but Benny makes it anyway. He calls Detective Liu. Do you remember Detective Liu and the smiling wall? The rare, honest cop who knew Benny's story better than he should have. Once, Liu tried to arrest a Tong enforcer and found himself surrounded by silence so complete it felt like drowning. He never made that mistake again, but he's not on Benny's payroll. He never has been, which is why Benny calls him now. Because when the rules are being rewritten, you need someone who remembers the original draft. They meet in a booth at the back of the 5 Happiness Cafe, the kind of place that plays old Mandarin pop music and serves tea in chipped blue porcelain. Liu sips his tea. "Daniel Lim," he says slowly. "That's a name I haven't heard in years." Benny says nothing. Liu nods. "You're worried he's here to buy Chinatown." Pause. "No," Liu corrects himself. "You're worried he already has." They sit in silence. Outside, the rain starts again. Finally, Liu leans in. "I can't help you, Ong. You know that. But I can tell you this. Lim isn't just here for turf. He's here for paper, land deeds, storefronts, the whole street." He pushes a slip of paper across the table. "One address, 113 Ross Alley, a building Benny doesn't own. Yet." Liu stands, tosses a 20 on the table, and leaves without another word. Benny folds the paper and puts it away. There are no accidents in Chinatown, only delayed intentions. And now, someone intends to build a new empire, one with a smiling face and a Western name. But Benny has faced men like Daniel before, and if he has to choose between silence and sale, he'll bury the deed. Mainstream historical fact. Post-Poiou. San Francisco saw rapid property shifts in Chinatown, with developers and speculators targeting undervalued land. Many businesses and homes were lost through quiet acquisitions, not violence. These losses reshaped the neighborhood's physical and political map, often without headlines. Many people still think Daniel Lim was just a composite figure, an embodiment of the foreign investor class. But there are property records, legal filings, a trail that suggests someone by that name held keys to half a block before vanishing in 1955. So what do you think? Was Daniel real, or just another ghost in Chinatown's ledger? Either way, Benny Ong now knows the war won't be fought in alleyways. It'll be fought in ink, and the red envelopes? They're contracts now, signed in silence. A week passes. The rain stops, but the quiet deepens, and that's always when it happens. When the fog lifts and the sun casts long shadows through Grant Avenue, Chinatown becomes too bright, too exposed. The streets bustle, but underneath the movement, there's stillness. People have started whispering a new phrase. Under the Dragon Gate, but above the law. They don't say Benny's name. They don't say Daniel Lim's either, but they all understand what it means. Someone is watching from a higher floor now, and he's not from here. At 113 Ross Alley, the building is old. 3 stories of crumbling brick, boarded windows, and one iron gate that hasn't been unlocked in years. For decades, it housed a gambling den, then an illegal herbal medicine distillery, and finally, silence. Now it's under renovation. New steel beams, Western contractors, clean signage that says, "Future site of the Pacific Cultural Alliance." Harmless on paper, threatening in context, Because everyone in Chinatown knows when an outsider builds something with the word alliance on the front, it means someone is trying to unify what should never be centralized. That's not how Chinatown works. You don't centralize. You circulate. Benny watches from across the street. He stands in the second-story window of a print shop he helped fund 2 decades ago. Below, a man in a blue windbreaker unlocks the gate at 113, steps inside. No hesitation. It's Daniel Lim, older than Benny remembered. Broader, too. He walks like someone who owns time. Behind him, Wu, a step behind. A little tense. Like someone following the path they cleared, but not leading it. Benny lowers the curtain. They didn't even try to hide. That night, Benny calls a rare midnight gathering. Not of lieutenants or elders, but of runners. The kids, boys with tattoos still healing, girls who walk like they've never been afraid. Third-generation Chinatown, raised on Western movies but fluent in Cantonese curses. Most of them don't even remember the old tongs, but they remember Benny. He sits in the back booth of the Green Orchid Cafe, a tiny spot that used to serve duck rice, but now pushes Coca-Cola and pork buns to high school kids. The staff clears out. The doors are locked. No bodyguards tonight, just Benny. And a table full of 20-somethings who expected to be at pool halls or rooftops tonight. Not here. He doesn't raise his voice. He just talks. 5 minutes, no more. He tells them about Ross Alley, about Daniel Lim, about how Chinatown will lose more than turf. It'll lose memory. It'll lose shape. The curving edges will be drawn straight, the voices flattened into one polite brochure. You won't see the changes, he says softly, until you walk past the temple and realize you don't recognize the door. Then he leaves. No instructions, just silence. The next day, graffiti appears on the gate of 113 Ross Alley. This door is not yours, spray painted in 3 languages. Daniel is not amused. He hires security. Wu stays quiet. But inside Harmony House, Benny reviews building permits. Not fake ones, real ones. He has a copy of every zoning request, every application Daniel's filed under his holding company, Lim Pacific Partners. They're airtight, except one, a plumbing line request, misfiled under a former Chinatown name. That's enough. Benny makes a call to Mr. Shu, a city clerk with weak ethics and a strong sense of gratitude ever since Benny paid for his son's medical bills 10 years ago. By noon the next day, work at 113 Ross Alley is halted. A violation. Temporary, of course, maybe even fixable. But Daniel gets the message. He's not just fighting gangs. He's fighting a memory machine. And Chinatown has a very long memory. Do you remember the night Benny burned the Opera House? That wasn't cruelty. It was erasure. Sometimes you don't defeat an idea. You unwrite it. That same night, Daniel hosts a quiet dinner at a French restaurant in Nob Hill. Wine, oysters, veal. Wu is there. So is a translator. 2 young real estate lawyers. 1 city council aide. Daniel raises a glass. Gentlemen, he says, we don't need to fight for Chinatown. We need to outlast it. No one laughs. Wu looks down at his plate. Because part of him knows Daniel doesn't care about Chinatown. Not the way Benny does. Not the way anyone from inside does. Daniel's loyalty ends where the margins end. Meanwhile, Benny receives an unexpected gift. A sealed envelope. No return name. Inside, a black and white photo of Daniel Lim, standing with a man in a military uniform. On the back, scrawled in Cantonese, Saigon, 1951. Do you still believe in contracts? That's when Benny understands. Daniel has been playing this game far longer than he let on. Longer even than Wu knows. Because if that photo is real, if Daniel worked Southeast Asia during the First Indochina War, then he isn't just a businessman. He's intelligence adjacent, a fixer, a buyer, a man who helps governments get what they need without ever being seen. Which means this fight, it's not personal, it's strategic. And that makes it even more dangerous. Mainstream historical fact. In the 1950s, Many Chinese and Vietnamese businessmen worked as civilian assets for intelligence agencies operating in post-colonial Southeast Asia. These individuals helped move money, weapons, and people, often without ever joining a formal side. They became middlemen between local crime syndicates and global power players. Many people still think Daniel Lim was part of that network, perhaps never officially, but functionally, which would explain why he never feared Chinatown's rules. So what do you think? Was Benny fighting a gangster or a ghost from the war? Either way, it's no longer just about silence. It's about survival, and Benny Ong has never written anything down. But he remembers everything. Rain again. But this time it doesn't fall gently. It crashes. Fat droplets hammer the rooftops like footsteps on temple drums. Steam billows from every vent, every manhole, turning the alleys into breathing things. Chinatown doesn't sleep, but tonight it hides. And Benny Ong? He walks without an umbrella. He passes the bookstore on Grant, where old Mr. Leong lights incense at the window each evening, like a silent prayer to keep history from dissolving. Tonight, Benny doesn't stop to acknowledge it. He's focused, because Daniel Lim has made his next move. That morning, Harmony House received an invitation, printed, embossed. Pacific Cultural Alliance presents A Night of Future Voices, an event hosted at a downtown hotel. Open bar, speeches, ribbon cutting, entertainment by local Chinatown youth. Guest list includes city officials, investors, press, and one seat left empty. Marked, Benny Ong, no RSVP required. It's not an invitation, it's a challenge. Benny doesn't throw it away. He places it on his desk next to the Jade Lion. The room stays quiet for a long time, until finally he murmurs something. 3 words. Locke, standing nearby, leans in, nods, and that's all it takes. The event is held at the St. Louis Hotel, an old ballroom turned into a gleaming showroom of ambition. Spotlights wash the walls in gold. Waiters pass glasses of sparkling wine. A jazz trio plays something upbeat but forgettable. While he's there, in a sleek black suit, he looks exhausted, like a man who thought he was leading, but now realizes he's riding shotgun to someone who never learned to brake. Daniel Lim walks the floor like a politician, shaking hands, laughing softly, talking about opportunity and legacy. He doesn't know Benny is watching. Across the street, in the shadow of a newspaper office, Benny stands inside a small tailor's shop. Through the rain-streaked window, he watches the event unfold. He doesn't plan to go inside. He plans to end it, but not with fire, not even with silence. This time with exposure. You remember Elsie Wong, the teenage photographer Benny spared in the boarding house? The one with the camera and too many questions? She's no longer a runaway. She's a reporter now. Low level. No column. But she has a badge. And a reason. Benny slides her a dossier that morning. Nothing too formal. Just pages clipped together with a silver pin. Photos. Property records. Building violations. A letter from 1951 with Daniel Lim's signature beside a Vietnamese military code name. It's not proof, but it's questions. And that's all Elsie needs. As guests at the gala sip from crystal flutes, and Wu reads a pre-written speech about unity and generational prosperity, Elsie walks through the doors, camera slung at her hip. She doesn't ask for permission. She takes 5 photos. Daniel notices her on the 3rd. His smile falters, but the speech doesn't stop, because it's not his voice on the mic. It's Wu's. And for the first time, Daniel looks like just another man in the room. Outside, Benny watches the flashbulb pop. He says nothing, just turns, coat soaked through, and walks away. The next morning, the Herald Tribune runs a small piece on page 9. Questions arise around Chinatown development firms' ties to former intelligence assets. It's not front page, but it's oxygen. And in Chinatown, oxygen feeds memory. Daniel Lim responds fast. Lawyers. Press statements. Unfounded, he calls it. defamation. But he doesn't deny the name, doesn't explain the photo. Because you can't bury a ghost with a press release. You have to outlast it, and that's harder than it looks. Do you remember the smiling wall in Detective Liu's office? The one with old surveillance photos and clipped mugshots, faces framed like yearbook entries for crimes that no one ever confessed? Daniel's photo now sits there, a blurry shot from the gala, smiling, confident, cornered, and behind it, written in Liu's own hand, "Follow the deeds, not the words." Benny returns to his rhythm. Harmony House adds 2 more workshops, one on tenant rights, the other on zoning loopholes. Young men start showing up at City Hall not with baseball bats, but with blueprints. And slowly, the laughter fades from Daniel's voice. Not gone, but thinner, because he knows something now. Benny Ong doesn't need to own the city. He just needs to outlast the men who think they do. 1 week later, Daniel announces he's stepping down from day-to-day operations at the Pacific Cultural Alliance. He blames stress, health, transition of leadership. Everyone nods. But Chinatown? Chinatown knows, because Daniel Lim broke the first rule of spoil and silence. He spoke too soon. Mainstream historical fact. During the 1950s, civic power in San Francisco often intersected with organized influence, especially around land development. Chinatown, facing immense external pressure, became a battleground not only of crime, but of narrative. Control of the story often meant control of the street. Many people still think Benny Ong orchestrated Daniel Lim's fall with little more than paper and patience. Others believe Lim simply misjudged the depth of Chinatown's memory. So what do you think? Was it exposure that ended him, or just a mirror held up too soon? Either way, he left the gala smiling. But Benny Ong, he never even walked through the door. The city exhales. After Daniel Lim steps down, Chinatown begins to settle like dust after a long, unseen quake. The headlines quiet. The renovations at 113 Ross Alley stall, then stop. Scaffolding remains, like a skeleton no one wants to bury, and the red awning disappears overnight. No one knows who ordered it removed. No one asks, but everyone assumes the same thing. Benny Ong took back his silence. In Harmony House, new voices rise, not loud, not boastful, just consistent. Cantonese classes, community mediation. A printing press begins publishing a small monthly leaflet. The title, Ink Without Sound, Inside, Stories, Oral Histories, Recipes, Neighborhood Notices. Nothing subversive, at least not on paper, but between the lines, memory. And memory is revolution in slow motion. Elsie Wong keeps working. Her article didn't win awards, but it won her freedom and Benny's quiet approval. She now carries her camera like a badge, and people in Chinatown greet her with small nods, reluctant smiles. She doesn't visit Benny's office again. She doesn't need to. She knows she's been given a gift. And in Chinatown, you never waste a gift from the silent boss. Meanwhile, Wu becomes a ghost in his own shadow. He shows up less and less. His boys, once loud and certain, now drift back to safer loyalties, some to Harmony House, some to old family connections. One joins a bakery apprenticeship. Another quietly applies to City College. Wu isn't defeated, but he's displaced because Benny didn't just beat him, he inherited him, which is somehow worse. One night, Wu returns to the Opera House ruins, just rubble now, grass sprouting between foundation stones. He sits on a brick and lights a cigarette. He doesn't know Benny is watching from across the street, but Benny doesn't intervene. Let him mourn. Every rebellion needs a grave. Do you remember when Benny told the young runners about memory? About the temple door they wouldn't recognize if they let outsiders redraw the lines? That story spreads now, not as legend, but as architecture. Because Benny's latest move is not a threat. It's a blueprint. At a quiet lunch with city planners, men who've known him for decades, some who owe him more than they'll admit, Benny proposes something unprecedented. The Chinatown Preservation District. Not a fortress, not a wall, a legal boundary under the guise of heritage protection. building height limits, facade restrictions, cultural integrity clauses. Hidden inside policy is the one thing Benny has always protected: continuity. It's passed without headlines. No press conference, no victory parade, just a clause in a zoning packet, quietly signed on a rainy Tuesday. And just like that, Chinatown becomes harder to erase. That same week, Benny visits the old tailor shop on Powell Street. The tailor, Mr. Falk, is blind now, but his hands still know stitches like they know prayers. Benny doesn't speak, just hands him a bolt of fabric, white, crisp, slightly heavier than usual. Mr. Falk chuckles. "So you want to be seen again, do you?" Benny just smiles. 2 nights later, Benny Ong walks the streets of Chinatown in a white suit. First time in years. No bodyguards, no fanfare, just presence. Children stop playing. Adults pretend not to notice. One elderly woman crosses the street just to hand him a steamed bun without a word. He accepts it, nods, then keeps walking. And that right there, that's a full speech in Chinatown. At the Golden Dragon, he sits for the first time in a public booth. Orders tea, sips it slowly. People glance, murmur. A waiter whispers to another, "Should we tell someone?" The other shrugs. Who? He's already everyone. Later, at his office, Benny stands before the wall of photographs. Black and white portraits of the forgotten and the loyal. He adds one more. It's not Wu. It's not Daniel. It's Elsie Wong. He pins it to the top right corner, not to display her, but to remember what he almost lost. Mainstream historical fact. In 1986, San Francisco formally created the Chinatown Residential and Commercial District, a preservation zone that many believe had its roots in policies quietly proposed decades earlier. Oral histories credit unnamed community elders with ensuring Chinatown would retain its unique structure, language, and scale. Many people still think Benny Ong was among those uncredited, that his influence stretched beyond crime into architecture, language, even bureaucracy. So, what do you think? Did he protect the neighborhood? Or freeze it in time? Either way, Chinatown remains, and Benny Ong still walks its streets, still never raises his voice, still louder than anyone else. The wind has changed. It doesn't howl. It brushes gently through Chinatown like a broom sweeping the edges. Leaves swirl around manholes. Paper lanterns rock gently on their cords. It's not the weather that has shifted. It's the temperature of attention. People from the outside have stopped looking in. No more real estate buzzwords. No citywide gala invitations. No reporters loitering by the temple steps asking questions they don't understand. Daniel Lim is gone. Wu has disappeared from dinner tables and whispered plans. And Benny Ong? He is present, which is rare and very intentional. At Harmony House, a new mural begins to take shape. Painted by a group of local teens with brushes borrowed from a long-shuttered opera troupe, the mural spans the entire eastern wall. It starts with swirling dragons, their tails forming the outline of Chinatown's streets. Rising from the center, hands pass red envelopes from one generation to the next. No faces, just hands, and silence. At the bottom corner, in pale gold letters, built in silence, preserved by memory. No one claims authorship, but everyone knows where the idea came from. Inside Benny's office, another silence is forming, a personal one. He sits alone most mornings now, tea cooling faster than it used to. Ah Lok's visits are less frequent. His fingers shake slightly when he picks up a pen, not out of fear, but the subtle tremor of time. He's not weak, but the stillness is getting heavier, like he's holding more than his age. Do you remember the girl who asked too many questions? Elsie Wong has returned. Older now, though still stubborn. She works for a city paper uptown, has her own desk. Still takes photographs, but now on film she develops herself. She visits Benny on a Friday afternoon, brings almond cookies and a sealed envelope. Inside, a draft. The silent boss of Chinatown, a portrait in stillness, a long-form feature. Half tribute, half puzzle. Nothing accusatory, just Story. I want to run it, she says. Benny doesn't respond. He reads, page after page, then folds it carefully and says, change the ending. She pauses. To what? He doesn't answer. She smiles anyway. Okay, but I'm keeping the photo. The photo in question? A candid Benny standing in front of Harmony House, arms behind his back, watching the mural as it takes shape. There's a child in the foreground, no more than 5, tracing the outline of a dragon's whiskers with one finger. The kid doesn't know Benny's behind him, but Benny's smile is almost visible. Later that night, Benny walks to a place he hasn't visited in over a decade. The Jade Basement, once a locked room filled with secrets, ledgers, photographs, deals sealed with silence. It's now empty, stripped bare. The floorboards creak with memory. He walks to the far corner, kneels, and pries loose the final panel in the wall. Inside a box, old, mahogany, etched with Chinese characters that once read, Ong, now faded. He opens it. Inside, a single envelope, unsealed, blank. He stares at it for a long time. Then, slowly, he writes on it 3 characters, 最后的声音, the final voice. Then he seals it. What's inside? No one knows. But the next morning, that envelope is delivered to Harmony House, placed in the bottom drawer of a file cabinet. Locked. No one touches it. But the young director there, a woman Benny once helped find her missing brother, whispers something as she slides the drawer shut. Not yet. Elsewhere in the city, Detective Liu retires. No ceremony. Just a paperclip box and a folder he never filed. On the top page, a list of Chinatown businesses that never went under. Quiet businesses, it reads. Stable. Paid in exact change. At the bottom, one final scribble. Ong, circled twice. No other notes. Do you remember when Benny stood at the Dragon Gate with nothing but a red envelope? That gesture now lives in the air like mythology. Tourists snap photos of the gate every day, not realizing they stand where Chinatown's loudest silence once spoke volumes. Years pass. Benny is seen less and less. He stops wearing white, starts wearing gray, then brown. Then one day, nothing at all. He simply stops being seen. No funeral, no obituary, just an empty chair by a window where he once sat each morning, sipping oolong, staring at the paper without reading it. Mainstream historical fact. Despite numerous oral accounts, no confirmed death certificate for Benny Ong has ever been produced. Some believe he died in the late 1950s. Others claim he simply vanished, retreating to a temple or boarding a ship to return to Guangzhou. Many people still think Benny Ong was a construct, an identity assumed by multiple men to preserve Chinatown's illusion of leadership. But the consistency of gesture, ritual, and presence suggests otherwise. So what do you think? Did he walk away, or did he pass quietly, exactly as he lived? Either way, Chinatown didn't mourn loudly. It didn't need to, because his story didn't end. It faded, like steam, like a page turned, like silence, folding in on itself. If you ask around today, especially the elders, the ones who sit near the Tin Hao Temple with folded hands and faraway eyes, they'll all tell you something different about the last time they saw Benny Ong. One says it was during the Moon Festival. Benny sat on a bench, alone, watching children parade with paper lanterns shaped like rabbits and dragons. He didn't speak. Just watched the light flicker across their faces like he was trying to memorize everyone. Another says she saw him in a bakery on Stockton Street, ordering pineapple buns and slipping an envelope into the donation box without anyone noticing. A third claims he was on a city bus. No driver, no route, just a ghost passenger riding endlessly through the hills. None of these stories agree, and somehow all of them feel true, because Benny Ong was never a man fixed in one moment. He was presence. He was pause. And after a certain point, he wasn't something you saw. He was something you felt. The streets have changed since then, not in ways that newspapers care about, but in ways the neighborhood notices. The shops still smell like star anise and boiled peanuts. Kids still run up and down the steps behind the old temple, their laughter echoing through bamboo scaffolding. But something in the architecture has shifted, quietly, permanently. On Ross Alley, the building that once bore Daniel Lim's ambitions still stands. But now it's a language school, owned collectively by local families, operated by a rotating staff of bilingual teachers. Every Saturday, they host Story Hour. The kids don't know who Benny Ong was, but they know how to listen. They've been taught that when the room goes quiet, something important is being said. At the Golden Lily, the upstairs gambling den is long gone. Now it's a calligraphy studio. Irony? Maybe. But if you ask the instructor, she'll tell you. This is how you hold power. In your wrist. In your breathing. You don't press. You glide. She doesn't say Benny taught her that, but the ink tray on her desk has a chipped corner, just like the one Benny used. Coincidence, of course, unless it isn't. Do you remember the tailor on Powell Street? Mr. Falk, hands trembling, still threading needles by memory. After Benny's last visit, he closed the shop within a month, left a note taped to the door. Some stitches must never be undone. The shop is a gallery now. They kept the sign and the note. A lock is gone now, too. Passed in his sleep, his cane found by the foot of the bed. No funeral, no fuss. But his apartment, so the story goes, had a single envelope on the kitchen table, unopened, stamped with Benny Ong's seal. No one knows what was inside. It wasn't for anyone else. Harmony House continues, no longer mysterious, no longer whispered about. It's just a place now. A good place. The kind of place where young people come in from the cold and leave with answers. Or at least, better questions. Inside the director's office, there's a small shelf marked Archive. One folder is labeled Unwritten Laws. 10 rules, typewritten. No signature. Every now and then, someone reads them aloud. Not for tradition, but for tone. Detective Liu's replacement, a young, fresh-faced man from Daly City, once asked an old Chinatown vendor why no one ever reported crime in the area. The vendor smiled and said, "What crime?" The officer pressed, so the vendor leaned in and whispered, "Would you report a shadow for moving?" The officer dropped it. Smart kid. Elsie Wong never published the article. Not the full one. She wrote a novel instead. Thinly veiled fiction, published in a limited run. Sold a few copies. She donated all the earnings to a scholarship fund for immigrant teens. The book's dedication reads, "For the man who never needed a stage." And the Dragon Gate? It's still there. Tourists take photos. Bus tours pause for lectures. They say it was a gift from Taiwan, erected in 1970, which is true. But the ground beneath it? That belongs to something older, something still listening. Sometimes, if you pass by just after sunset, you'll see a man in a gray coat standing there, hands clasped behind his back, watching the lights flicker to life. If you blink, you'll miss him. If you stare too long, he'll be gone. Mainstream historical fact. The Dragon Gate was erected in 1970 as a ceremonial entrance to San Francisco's Chinatown, symbolizing the enduring relationship between Chinese culture and the city. It has since become one of the most photographed landmarks in California. Many people still think the site holds older meaning. Unofficial gatherings, silent pacts, stories that never made the papers. Some believe Benny Ong's final appearance was under that arch, watching the future unfold in silence. So what do you think? Was Benny Ong ever truly gone? Or did he simply become what he always was? A guardian made of absence. Either way, Chinatown holds. And the silence still speaks. The years stretch, not with headlines or great drama, but with the slow and steady hum of life rebuilding itself. Chinatown is no longer a battlefield. It's a garden. Not untouched, not unscarred, but carefully tended. The seeds Benny Ong planted grow in quiet rows, shaded by the memory of his gaze. There are no new tongues. Not really. The old ones fade like incense smoke, still fragrant in stories but insubstantial in practice. What replaces them isn't organization, but expectation, a way of being, a rhythm inherited by osmosis. You don't extort a grocer anymore. You give their niece a job at your print shop. You don't threaten a neighbor. You buy their tea for a month when their son is sick. It's not law, but it's binding. Harmony House expands. It now spans 2 floors, and a rooftop garden grows bok choy and lemon balm. A few small offices upstairs house fledgling community nonprofits. None of them are owned by anyone, and yet Benny's presence lingers in the way people wait a second longer before speaking, in how the young director, Leanne, folds her hands behind her back when she's thinking, without knowing she's imitating him, in the red envelope sealed in a drawer, still unopened, marked 最后的声音, the final voice. No one dares touch it. And that too is power. One morning, a letter arrives addressed simply to Chinatown. No return address, no stamp. Inside, a photograph, old, sepia-toned. It's a storefront in 1930s San Francisco. 2 men stand outside, one young, one older. The younger wears a pressed shirt, blank face, eyes like deep water. The older has a hand on the boy's shoulder. On the back of the photo, 5 words. We never needed a name. They frame it, hang it in Harmony House's hallway. No caption, just presence. Across the city, a museum opens an exhibit. Voices of the Fog, Chinatown's silent century. Artifacts, photos, oral recordings. They request comment from any surviving relatives of Benjamin Ong. None come forward, but someone drops off a red envelope, empty. No note, just the envelope. Do you remember the rules of spoil and silence? Once carried by hand, then whispered, now typed and laminated. 10 principles that guided a city within a city. They're taught in workshops now, voluntarily, optional, and yet no one skips that session, because Chinatown knows rules only matter if you believe in the silence that holds them. On the 15th anniversary of Harmony House, Leanne opens the file cabinet. She unlocks the bottom drawer, holds the envelope, waits, then gently places it back. Not today. Some truths aren't meant to be read. Some voices aren't meant to echo. They simply remain. The final photo taken of Benny Ong, or someone believed to be him, surfaces in the possession of a retired bus driver. It's grainy, taken from the rearview mirror. A man in the back seat, coat draped over his knees, hands folded, calm, still, eyes closed. The timestamp is from the night Daniel Lim left San Francisco. Draw your own conclusions. Mainstream historical fact. In 2011, a proposal was made to rename a Chinatown alley in honor of a local figure who shaped the community from the shadows. It was tabled. No name was ever officially submitted. Many people still think the alley was meant to become Ong Wei. Others say Benny would have hated that. He never needed a street sign. He had every street already. So what do you think? Do legacies require names, or just repetition? Because Chinatown repeats Benny Ong every day, without saying it. In footstep, in folded hands, in the red paper no one opens. And now, as we ease into the final moments of this journey together, the pace begins to soften. Like the lanterns dimming at closing time, or the last spoon placed quietly into an empty teacup, the story begins to settle. The edges blur. The noise fades. You've walked a long road tonight, through alleys and rain, through whispers and rules never written. You've stood beneath the Dragon Gate and watched history pass not in headlines, but in the tilt of a man's head or the silence in a crowded room. You've seen what power looks like when it doesn't announce itself, when it doesn't raise a voice, when it simply stays. Benny Ong may be gone, or maybe not, but his rules remain. So wherever you are right now, whether it's raining softly outside or the air is still and quiet, I hope this story has given your mind a place to rest. I hope it reminded you that silence, when chosen with care, can be louder than any shout. Close your eyes now if you haven't already. Let the streetlights fade. Let the fog settle. And know that somewhere in the soft hum of memory, someone like Benny Ong is still walking those streets. White shoes never wet, jacket always buttoned, saying nothing, because some stories never need to speak to be heard. Sleep well, friend. Sweet dreams. The city doesn't mark the passing of quiet men. There are no parades, no headlines, no brass plaques to polish or wreaths to lay. In San Francisco, loud men get bridges named after them. Quiet men get alleyways, if they're lucky. And even then, only the locals remember who they were. But Chinatown remembers differently. The year is 1961. The world outside is changing fast. President Kennedy talks about new frontiers. The Soviet Union is launching dogs into orbit. Across the bay, young radicals begin speaking about revolution. But inside the 6 square blocks of Chinatown, nothing happens quickly. Change here still moves like mist, soft, deliberate, and sometimes backward. Harmony House hosts its first citizenship tutoring class. 34 students show up. 3 bring cookies. One, an elderly man named Mr. Young, tells the young instructor that he once delivered rice to Benny Ong's office every Thursday for 9 years. He never spoke to him, not once, but every week the money was exact, folded once, no tip, no debt. And every week, a tiny slip of red paper in return. See? Thank you. No name, just thanks. Do you remember the red envelope marked the final voice? On a quiet morning in January, it's gone. No broken lock, no forced drawer, just missing. And in its place, a photograph. Benny Ong, standing alone at the harbor. Fog curling around his ankles like a curtain about to close. On the back, in delicate brush script, a voice isn't lost when no one speaks, only when no one listens. The staff at Harmony House don't frame it. They tuck it into the back of the archive shelf, where it belongs, where it waits. At the Golden Dragon, a new cook takes over the kitchen. His grandmother once worked there, back when the gambling den still buzzed overhead. She left him one story before she passed. She said Benny Ong once came in during a blackout. No electricity, no open floor, just candles and nervous staff. He sat at a table alone, ordered no food, and said 5 words. Keep the water boiling, always. Then left. The cook still doesn't know if it was a metaphor, but he keeps the water boiling anyway, just in case. Elsewhere, a museum curator finds an unlabeled reel of film in a forgotten Chinatown basement. It contains fragments, 1950s street scenes, dragon dancers, crowds, fireworks, and one 5-second clip. A man in a white suit, walking calmly through a market. He stops, looks directly into the camera, smiles just slightly, then turns a corner and disappears. The reel isn't displayed, but it is cataloged, filed under. Subject unknown, behavior iconic. The temple bell still rings at sunset. No one knows who maintains the rope. The monk says it's been that way for decades. I never see them come in, but the rope is never dry, and the bell never fails. Some say it's just the wind. Others aren't so sure. Mainstream historical fact. Chinatown's transformation in the 1960s and 70s was largely undocumented. What official records exist focus on zoning, permits, and census figures. But the real change, how a community resisted erasure without resistance, is harder to find. Many people still think the structure left behind by Benny Ong wasn't built of loyalty or fear, but of habit. That his presence lingered in what wasn't done. No betrayal, no collapse. Just a pattern followed long after the hands that created it were gone. So what do you think? Can silence become structure? Can one man become a blueprint? Benny Ong never claimed to lead. He just walked the same paths again and again until others learned to walk them too. And when he vanished, the paths remained. Down by the bay, under the rusted skeleton of an old pier, someone has carved something into the wood. It's nearly gone now, faded by salt and wind, but if you crouch low, shine a light just right, you can still read it. He spoke once, it was enough. Some stories don't end, they just lose their narrator. By the 1970s, Chinatown is more than a neighborhood. It's a symbol, a surviving relic, a cultural hub, a postcard that somehow stayed uncreased while everything around it folded. Tour buses pass through daily. Cameras flash. Vendors shout in a mix of Cantonese, Mandarin, and English shaped by immigration, memory, and necessity. But if you know where to look, the older language remains, not the spoken one, the silent one, the one written in the placement of a teacup, in how low a bow dips, in the pause between yes and thank you, in who speaks first and who never does. And at the heart of it, still somehow, Benny Young. His name isn't said aloud much anymore. The kids sweeping storefronts don't know it. The students in ESL classes haven't heard it. Even some of the elders who pass quietly into the next world never say it outright. But every now and then, something slips. The way we do things, it's how we were taught. Someone showed us once, long ago. Before the white suits, no one ever says his name. They don't need to. On a narrow street behind Portsmouth Square, a man sweeps the pavement before dawn. He's done it every morning for 20 years. No one pays him. He doesn't ask for anything. When questioned, he shrugs, just keeping it clean. But above his shop door, there's a carved symbol, Jing Stillness. Once, when the city tried to issue a citation for sidewalk obstruction, a sealed envelope was delivered to the building inspector's desk. Inside, a photograph of the inspector's father receiving a plaque at a Chinatown banquet in 1958, standing next to a familiar figure in a white suit. The inspector never brought up the citation again. Do you remember the boy they called Tofu? He's grown now, owns a logistics company at the edge of the city, ships goods up and down the West Coast. Quiet, honest business. No flash, no press. But in his office hangs a single framed envelope. No writing, no stamp, just red, folded clean, never opened. He tells his employees it's a family relic. It isn't, not by blood, but by bond. In a senior home tucked into the back blocks of the Richmond district, one room holds a record player. The needle is worn, the vinyl scratchy, but it still plays one song on repeat, an old Mandarin ballad from the 1930s. The nurse says the resident, an old woman with fading eyes, asks for the same song every night. She doesn't speak anymore, except once, when a visitor brought almond cookies and sat by her bed in silence. The nurse swears the old woman whispered, "He never said goodbye." No one knows who the visitor was, but she left behind a note. Tell her he's still walking. Back in Chinatown, Harmony House hosts a reunion. Former students, volunteers, old staff. Laughter fills the garden. Someone brings a photo album. They flip pages, faces long grown, names half forgotten. In one picture, a group photo from 1962, a figure stands in the back, barely visible. Gray coat, eyes like mirrors. Someone points and asks, was he the teacher? Leanne, now older herself, smiles. Something like that. That night, after everyone's gone, she unlocks the file cabinet, pulls out the sealed envelope. The final voice. She doesn't open it. She just holds it, then places it in a new box. This one made of rosewood with no hinges, hand-carved. She locks the box and hands it to the youngest staff member the next morning. Someday, she says, you'll know when. Mainstream historical fact. Throughout the late 20th century, Chinatown in San Francisco remained a remarkably cohesive neighborhood, maintaining cultural autonomy even as other ethnic districts fragmented under development and gentrification. Much of this was attributed not to politics, but to tradition and inherited systems of mutual respect. Many people still think there was one person behind that preservation, a man whose name never appeared in council minutes, who never owned more than he needed, but whose rules still echo. So what do you think? Is that kind of power real, or just repetition disguised as legacy? Because if Benny Ong never existed, if he was only myth, Then why do so many people still behave like someone is watching? And why, even now, do some people still wait for the room to fall quiet before they begin? The seasons change gently in San Francisco. There are no blizzards, no blistering summers, just shifting fogs and soft rains, the air forever threaded with salt and incense. And in Chinatown, time isn't marked by calendars. It's marked by absences. A shop closes, a bench is left unoccupied, a red envelope is no longer placed beneath the tea kettle. That's how they know someone is gone. At the Tin Hao Temple, a new generation tends the incense. They don't chant the same way their grandmothers did. Their prayers are shorter, their shoes louder, but they sweep the same steps, light the same coils. On the fourth stair from the top, carved faintly into the stone, is a character so worn you'd miss it if you weren't looking. When to ask, they don't know who carved it, but the priests say it's always been there. A young woman named Jia, barely 22, begins asking questions. She's studying urban history at City College, writes her term paper on nonverbal power structures in mid-century Chinatown. She interviews shopkeepers, temple caretakers, barbers, old postal clerks. Again and again she hears the same pattern. Things used to run smoother. We didn't need meetings back then. There was someone who made sure we didn't embarrass ourselves. She asks who. They never answer. But one old man, a retired cook missing 3 teeth, simply hands her a fortune cookie. It's empty. He grins. Now you get it? Jia finds her way to Harmony House. She asks for access to the archives. They give her a key. Inside, she finds hundreds of folders, community plans, translation records, letters from City Hall, even menus from restaurants long since vanished. But in the very back, under a false bottom in the filing cabinet, she finds something strange. A sealed red envelope, heavier than it looks. No name, just one character brushed in black ink. Jing Stillness. She doesn't open it. She just sits with it, and somehow, that feels like the correct response. Do you remember the boy with the dragon tattoo who defected from Wu's crew? He's a carpenter now. He spends his mornings repairing windows in the neighborhood, fixing hinges, restoring old signage. He says it's work that puts things back where they belong. One day, he's repairing a door near the Dragon Gate when a tourist asks him where to find that famous gangster's shrine. He laughs, says nothing, then writes an address on a napkin. The tourist walks 2 blocks, finds a mural of hands passing envelopes. No shrine, no gangster, just memory. Detective Liu's old desk sits in the basement of a different precinct now. In a dusty evidence room, a junior officer finds a small cardboard box marked ONG case. Inside, nothing but photos, people looking away, backs turned, a man in a gray suit standing just off frame. The officer asks her supervisor what it means. He shrugs. Sometimes the absence is the file. She never brings it up again. Elsie Wong, now in her 60s, gives one final public lecture before retiring. She doesn't talk about Benny, not directly, but she ends the talk with a story about a boy who cleaned floors for a man he never saw, who once found a red envelope taped under a desk. Inside, a folded handkerchief, monogrammed, but not with initials, just the character, Chia Home. She doesn't explain what it means. She just closes her notebook and says, "That was Chinatown's quietest lesson. You don't own it, you tend it." Then she steps off the stage and disappears. Back in the alleyways, the murals fade, the ink bleeds in the rain, and the stories thin. But the silence remains. It drapes itself across doorways like curtain beads. It fills bowls of soup passed without comment. It hums through apartment walls when a neighbor plays an old song. The people don't know they're participating in ritual, but they are. Because Benny Ong's greatest legacy isn't a building or a document. It's a reflex, an instinct, the impulse to wait 1 second longer before reacting, to listen without reply, to recognize when you're in the presence of something that won't explain itself and doesn't need to. Mainstream historical fact. Chinatown's post-war cohesion is often studied through policy, migration, and crime suppression. but rarely is attention given to the cultural enforcement of deference, of choosing not to act, not to retaliate, not to elevate one's voice. Many people still think that restraint came from fear, but those who lived it know it came from inheritance. So what do you think? Can a silence be passed down? Can a whisper become law? Can a man disappear and still govern the rhythm of a city? If you've walked through Chinatown lately and wondered why the wind feels like memory, that's why. You're not alone. Someone is still walking. Just ahead, night falls the way it always has in Chinatown, slowly, like a curtain drawn by hand. Neon lights flicker to life in the windows. Paper lanterns swing overhead, their red skins glowing like embers suspended in time. And down in the alleys, there's a silence that hums, not from absence, but from presence unannounced. And across from the old Waverly tea shop, something changes. A bench is installed, not by the city, not part of a park, just appears. A simple wooden bench, dark-stained, slightly curved, positioned under a faded street lamp. There's no plaque, no initials, but the older shopkeepers nod when they see it, because everyone remembers the man who never sat. And now, there's finally a place for him to rest. The community's elders begin using it, one by one. They sit with thermoses of tea, small radios playing old songs, sometimes nodding at passers-by, but saying little. The younger people begin calling it the listening bench, as in, if you're stuck on a decision, go sit at the listening bench. Go see if the bench has anything to say. And soon, it becomes part of the unofficial map. No signs, no directions, just understanding. At Harmony House, one of the new interns proposes digitizing the archives, uploading oral histories, scanning old flyers, building a website. Leanne, now in her 60s, gives her blessing, but adds one request. Don't touch the red envelope. The intern blinks. The one marked the final voice? She nods. It's not for the internet. He doesn't ask again. And when he scans the index card catalog, he sees something strange. The drawer for Ong Benny is empty, not misfiled, just never filled, because that was never the point. Do you remember the florist who used to deliver arrangements to Chinatown funerals? She's long since retired. But once a year, she sends a bouquet to a building that's no longer a business, just a boarded-up storefront near Clay Street. Peonies, always red, always with a folded card that reads, "You kept the street safe. No return address." The building doesn't even have a mailbox anymore, but the delivery always arrives. Elsewhere, in a civic meeting downtown, a young urban planner presents a case study on informal power structures in ethnic enclaves. She brings up Harmony House, shows slides of murals, photos of workshops, anonymized quotes from oral interviews. At the end, someone asks, "What made it last?" She pauses, then clicks to the final slide. A blank screen, black, with one word in white, silence. The room is very quiet, until someone exhales softly and says, "Respectfully, that's not an answer." She replies, "It wasn't meant to be." Detective Liu's desk, now cleared of files, still bears a single inscription under the drawer. Listen twice before speaking once. The officer who now uses the desk keeps her gun in that drawer, but she never erases the inscription. She says it's good advice. She doesn't know who wrote it, but she feels better knowing it's there. Elsie Wong's novel is reprinted. A small publishing house in Vancouver finds the manuscript and republishes it under a new title, The Man in the White Suit Who Never Sat Down. It sells modestly, but one reviewer, writing for a Chinatown newsletter in Toronto, ends her review like this: "This is not a book about a gangster. It's about gravity, the kind that doesn't pull you down but holds you in place. At the Dragon Gate, the stone lions are pressure washed every few years, but one of them, on the west side, still bears a tiny groove just under the eye, not visible from a distance, barely noticeable even up close. But if you trace your finger across it, you'll feel it. The carved outline of a character, not Chinese, just the letter B. Some say a tourist scratched it. Others say it's older than the statue. Still others say it wasn't carved at all, just appeared one morning after a heavy rain. Mainstream historical fact. Chinatown has the lowest crime rate per capita of any district in San Francisco, consistently across several decades. Sociologists credit tight-knit family networks and unwritten neighborhood codes for this anomaly. Many people still think the reason runs deeper, that someone made silence a virtue, that someone taught people how to carry rules without saying them, that someone, maybe real, maybe myth, once created a city within a city. So what do you think? Can a bench remember? Can a flower arrangement protect a street? Can a man who never wrote a word leave behind a full conversation? If you ask Chinatown, the answer is always the same, but you'll have to sit quietly to hear it. There's something sacred about repetition, the way certain things happen the same way, again and again, not because anyone commands it, but because the memory of how they're supposed to happen lingers in the air. In Chinatown, this is how tradition survives, not in ceremonies, in muscle memory. Someone folds dumplings the same way their grandmother did. Someone sweeps the step 3 times before unlocking the door. Someone lights the joss stick and pauses for exactly 7 seconds before planting it in the ash. And across it all, unseen but undeniable, the echo of Benny Ong at a corner grocery store on Stockton. The owner, Mr. Chu, has run the register for 41 years. His son now helps. His grandson stocks shelves. One day, a teenager tries to shoplift a pack of cigarettes. Mr. Chu stops him at the door, doesn't yell, doesn't call the police. He just places a red envelope in the boy's hand and whispers, "Use this for something better." Inside, $5. No name, no lesson. The boy returns 3 weeks later and offers to sweep floors on Saturdays. Mr. Chu accepts. This is how justice used to work. Still works here. At a high school career day event, a student asks the visiting speaker, a well-dressed woman from Harmony House, how she first became involved in community work. She smiles, says, "Because someone once stood beside me in silence when I was scared." The student blinks. "That's it?" She nods. "That was enough." "Do you remember the old tailor shop? It's now a museum annex." Tourists wander in, confused by the minimal signage. There's no guided tour, no interactive exhibit, just a single display case. Inside, a pressed white jacket, spotless, crisp. Next to it, a small placard, worn by a man who never asked to be known, still remembered by those who didn't forget. No name, because the name was never the point. A local podcast starts a short series titled Whispers of Chinatown. In episode 2, they feature the story of the listening bench. The host laughs, says, "It's just a bench, right?" Then interviews 5 different people who've sat on it. Each tells a different story. One says they decided not to move to another city. One says they finally forgave their brother. One says nothing at all, just cries softly into the microphone. The host doesn't mock them. He just says, "Sometimes silence is the story." And at Harmony House, the youngest intern is promoted to program coordinator. He moves into the old office upstairs, finds a small box on the shelf. Inside, a folded note. 5 words. "If unsure, pour tea first." It's not signed, but he places it in a frame, not for display, just to remember. Back on Grand Avenue, a tourist stops a street vendor. "Excuse me, was there ever a real crime boss here? Someone big, like a mafia type?" The vendor shrugs, then says, "Only person I ever saw feared around here. Never raised his voice." "What happened to him?" The vendor points at the street. At some point he became part of the sidewalk, then offers a candied plum and refuses payment. "You're in his neighborhood now," he adds with a wink. A muralist paints a new dragon across the side of a seafood restaurant. She includes something new in the design. Small hands holding an envelope, hidden in the coils of the dragon's tail. She doesn't explain it, but when asked, she says, "Sometimes we don't need new stories. Just need to remember the ones that already listened." Mainstream historical fact. In oral cultures, storytelling isn't just for entertainment. It's infrastructure. It carries rules, codes, values. In communities like Chinatown, where written records were often incomplete or deliberately destroyed, oral memory became a form of civil architecture. Many people still think Benny Ong was never fully real, that his presence was cultivated by the community, a shared invention to protect something fragile. But if he was fiction, he was one they all agreed to believe. And when a community agrees to believe in a silence, it becomes law. So what do you think? Can a name echo louder when never spoken? Can a legend lead when no one claims it? Or maybe Benny Ong was never a man at all, just a pause, long enough for a neighborhood to decide how to carry itself forward. There is no statue, no bust of Benny Ong in any Chinatown square, no golden plaque embedded into the sidewalk, no bronze face staring down from a column above the lanterned streets. And yet, his story is etched deeper than stone. You find it in the pauses between conversations, in the way a teenager lowers their voice when stepping into an elder's shop, in how a deal is sealed with a handshake and a nod, never a signature. In Chinatown, memory is muscle, and Benny Ong was the tendon holding it together. At Portsmouth Square, pigeons scatter as two elderly men play shangqi under a shaded awning. One leans forward, moving a piece without looking up. You know, he mutters. He used to watch us from that bench. The other scoffs. He didn't have time for games. He had time for everything, the first says, and moves his general forward. The conversation ends there, but the mood changes. The next move is made more carefully. A teacher at the Chinese Education Center on Washington Street asks her third-grade class to write about a local hero. She gets 20 drawings. Some show Bruce Lee, some their grandparents. One, strangely, is of a man in a suit holding a teacup, drawn in pencil so faint it barely shows. The student writes only, "He helped everyone by not talking." The teacher frames it, doesn't ask questions. One of Wu's old runners, now a community leader, hosts a free martial arts class in the basement of a noodle shop. He begins every session the same way. He pours tea into 4 cups on the floor, one for his teacher, one for himself, one for the room, and one for someone who chose not to be remembered. He never says the name. The students never ask, but none of them ever drink from that 4th cup. Do you remember the red envelope marked "The Final Voice"? Its contents are finally revealed, not by intention. During a renovation at Harmony House, the envelope is accidentally dislodged from the file drawer and tears slightly open. Inside, a single line written in elegant brush strokes. "You were never meant to need me." No threat, no wisdom, no orders. Just that, a gentle stepping back, the ultimate exit. Leanne retires that year. At her farewell dinner, someone asks her what she plans to do next. She smiles. Sit on a bench, drink tea, remember what not to say. There's laughter, but no one jokes too hard, because they know where she learned that. A city council resolution is quietly passed to rename a tiny alley after Harmony House. The alley itself has no significance, but the community requests it anyway. The plaque reads, "For those who held their voices and shaped us anyway." One foggy morning, a boy with a skateboard rides past the Dragon Gate. His phone buzzes. His friend's voice in his ear says, "Did you hear about the ghost?" The boy laughs, then glances up, sees a man in a gray coat walking slowly toward Stockton Street. He turns to get a better look, but no one's there. Just steam from a vent and a shopkeeper sweeping yesterday's footprints into the drain. Mainstream historical fact. The Dragon Gate has no recorded incidents of supernatural sightings. And yet, it remains the center of countless ghost stories, particularly about a man who walks alone late at night, vanishing without sound. Many people still think it's superstition, a holdover from community folklore, but others, quietly, seriously say, "He's checking the corners, just like always." So what do you think? Can duty outlive a body? Can a promise echo beyond the voice that made it? Can a man disappear so fully that he becomes how others walk? Maybe Benny Ong never wanted to be remembered, but Chinatown, it remembers him anyway, not with monuments, but with silence. Every city carries ghosts, but San Francisco's are different. They don't wail or drag chains. They don't rattle windows or flicker lights. They simply walk, quietly, unnoticed, often in plain sight. And nowhere do they walk more softly than in Chinatown. One cold December evening, A girl named May stands outside her grandmother's bakery on Jackson Street, waiting for the last customer to leave. Her phone is dead. She forgot her coat. She watches the steam rising from manholes, the shadows crawling up fire escapes. Then she sees him, an older man in a gray coat, walking alone. Not fast, not slow, just moving with purpose. He doesn't look at her, doesn't speak. But when he passes, she feels her heartbeat slow. Feels somehow safe. She never mentions it until years later, when she tells her daughter, "The street listens if you walk quiet enough." At the Chinatown YMCA, a new leadership program teaches teenagers how to speak publicly, organize events, advocate for change. One afternoon, the instructor, young, energetic, says, "Never underestimate the power of your voice." A student raises his hand. "Didn't someone once run this place without speaking?" The room goes still. The instructor blinks. "Where did you hear that?" "I don't know." The kid shrugs. "My uncle said the guy wore white suits. Never shouted. But somehow people listened anyway." The instructor smiles. "And how did that work out for him?" The kid grins. "We're still talking about him, right? Do you remember the opera house Benny burned? They rebuilt it, not to perform operas, to house a youth theater troupe. They write new plays based on Chinatown's history. One is about a silent enforcer, another about a girl who receives mysterious red envelopes. But there's one play the director refuses to let them stage. It's titled Benny. Too soon, she says. Too close. Instead, she places the script in a wooden box on her office shelf. It sits next to a chipped jade lion. A filmmaker visits from out of town, wants to make a documentary, interviews a dozen locals, gets half-truths, cryptic glances, deflections. One elder finally tells him, "You're asking the wrong questions." "So what should I ask?" the filmmaker pleads. The man shrugs. "Ask yourself why we haven't told the whole story, and then ask why we still live by it." The filmmaker leaves with an empty notebook, but he never forgets. In a quiet corner of the Chinatown library, a boy sits with a biography of San Francisco's organized crime. He flips pages, scanning for Chinese names. When he asks the librarian if there's a section on Chinatown bosses, she says, "There are stories, but no one wrote them down." He frowns. "Why not?" She leans in and says, "Because the people who mattered didn't need the credit," then hands him a slim volume of poetry titled The Street Remembers. He doesn't understand all of it, but he feels something settle in his chest, like an echo or a footprint in wet concrete. Harmony House now sponsors college scholarships. Each year, one envelope is given without ceremony. No press release, no photo, just a name, a sealed letter, and a single typed line. "When you rise, do it quietly." Recipients often cry. They don't always know why. Detective Lou's badge is on display at the SFPD Hall of History. Beneath it, a note he wrote by hand. "Sometimes the loudest suspects are innocent, and the quietest ones are keeping the city together." A young officer reads it, then asks the docent, "Did he really mean that?" The docent thinks for a long moment, then replies, "Yes, but he also meant, don't interrupt Chinatown unless you're invited." Do you remember the line Benny wrote on that final scrap of paper? "You were never meant to need me." That's the center of it all. His power wasn't in his presence. It was in his absence. In creating a world where he could leave, and everything would still move exactly as it should. Mainstream historical fact. Anthropologists studying Chinatown have documented a phenomenon called inherited governance memory, where younger generations, even without documentation or direct instruction, maintain systems of courtesy and hierarchy shaped by prior power structures. Many people still think Benny Ong wasn't one person, that his manner, his silence, his rituals were adopted by many over time, until the identity became a community performance. But then someone always says, "If he wasn't real, how come I saw him?" So what do you think? Can one man become a rhythm? Can legacy be built without a foundation? Only a pause? And when you walk through Chinatown at night and the air feels heavy, maybe it's not the fog, maybe it's someone still watching. Just out of frame, just enough. By now, Benny Ong has become more atmosphere than man. He's the hush that falls when old friends greet each other with a nod instead of words. He's the reason the delivery boy leaves the last box just inside the threshold without stepping into the room. He's the pause a grandmother takes before answering her granddaughter's question about how things used to be. In Chinatown, Benny isn't gone. He's just dispersed, like incense smoke curling toward a ceiling fan. Seen for a moment, then simply everywhere. One foggy evening, a woman named Clara returns to San Francisco for the first time in 30 years. She moved away after college, swore never to look back. Life didn't turn out the way she planned. Divorce, layoffs, cities that never felt like home. Now she walks down Grant Avenue, hands in her coat pockets, unsure what she's even looking for. She passes the listening bench, pauses, then sits. Nothing happens. No visions, no ghosts, just the soft rustle of wind tugging at lantern strings. But when she stands to leave, she feels lighter. Not better, just clearer. And taped beneath the bench is a folded piece of paper, one word written in black ink. Still, she takes it, keeps walking. A graduate student from Berkeley publishes an academic article titled Nonverbal Authority, Case Studies from Mid-20th Century Ethnic Enclaves. Her thesis: some of the most effective leaders in tight-knit communities exercised control not through commands or violence, but through atmosphere, mutual obligation, and selective silence. The article is well received, but what sticks with readers most is the final paragraph. In one community, a man led for decades without ever officially existing. No files, no birth certificate, no arrest record. And yet, everything moved around him. Some say that's not possible. But the city kept moving, didn't it? Do you remember Harmony House's Rosewood box? It's opened one final time, not with ceremony, just practicality. A pipe has burst in the wall behind the shelf. They need to move everything. The coordinator lifts the box, opens it, and finds not just the envelope, but a second item beneath it, a smooth stone, hand-carved. On it, one word in English: enough. He replaces it, closes the box, locks it again, and moves it to the new archive room. Elsewhere in Chinatown, a group of children paint murals on the side of an old fish market. They've been told to illustrate what Chinatown means to you. One child draws a tea house, another, a dragon. One girl draws two hands passing something invisible. When asked what it is, she says, "It's not a thing, it's a promise." The adults exchange glances. No one corrects her. A tourist walks into a barber shop and asks, "Wasn't there a famous gangster who ran this area?" The barber, 78 years old, doesn't look up, keeps trimming the hair of the boy in his chair. "Lot of stories," he murmurs. The tourist presses, "But was he real?" The barber smiles without showing teeth. "If he wasn't real, who taught us to be this quiet?" The boy in the chair says nothing. But later, when he walks home, he doesn't step on a single sidewalk crack. At Portsmouth Square, someone leaves a folded white jacket on the listening bench, neatly pressed. No stains. It's gone by morning. No one sees who took it. But a week later, a donation arrives at Harmony House. A sealed envelope, no return address. Inside, $5,000 in crisp bills, and a note: "He didn't need a statue, you don't need my name." Mainstream historical fact. In neighborhoods like Chinatown, informal social codes shaped by elders or unofficial figures often carried more influence than police or politicians. Scholars refer to these networks as shadow custodians of order. Many people still think Benny Ong was the ultimate shadow custodian, not because he controlled people, but because he removed the need to control them. So what do you think? Can someone build peace not by force, but by expectation? Can a man become a standard? Not through words, but through the space he left behind. There is a quiet kind of immortality, not the kind you find in textbooks or marble busts, not the kind announced at press conferences or celebrated in documentaries. It's the kind that hides in plain sight, in gestures, in choices, in tone. And Benny Ong? He achieved it without ever asking for it. On a rainy Tuesday, a school janitor unlocks the basement of an old Chinatown elementary. He's been working there for decades, long enough to know when to speak and when to listen. That morning, he finds a folded napkin on the windowsill. Not wet, not torn, just dry and resting. On it, a single message in neat cursive. No need to rush. They'll listen when they're ready. He shows no one, but keeps it in his wallet. At the Chinese Historical Society, a curator begins compiling an exhibit on unseen architects of Chinatown. She collects artifacts, quotes, photos of unnamed figures standing at the edge of frame. She includes a blank section, just a spotlight on an empty pedestal. Visitors ask, "What was supposed to go here?" She always replies, "The man who made room for everyone else." Do you remember Wu? The kingpin who once ruled with fists and fear. He's long gone, but one of his nephews, now a quiet bookseller, sits alone in a tiny shop lined wall to wall with novels, biographies, and mythologies. He keeps a single photo behind the register. It's not of Wu. It's of a group of neighborhood children gathered around a man in a white jacket. None of their faces turned toward the camera. He doesn't talk about it. But when someone tries to steal a book, he doesn't shout. He just says, "You're better than this. Try again tomorrow." They always come back. A local poet writes a chapbook called The Man Who Wasn't There. Each page is a meditation on presence, on legacy, on how silence can shape a community more sharply than speech ever could. One line becomes iconic among young writers in the neighborhood. He never needed to be loud. He already occupied the pause between questions. In an upstairs room above an herbalist's shop, an elderly woman keeps a red box under her bed. Inside, 3 envelopes, a faded tea packet, and a small jade token with a single carved character, "Shoe to guard." She's never told anyone where she got them, but she instructs her grandson to place the box back under her bed if ever moved. "No matter where you go," she says, "this neighborhood remembers better than people do." One early morning, the city installs a new stop sign on Clay Street. By noon, someone's placed a small sticker on the back, a stylized outline of a man in a white coat, one hand raised as if saying, "Shh." No one takes it down. No one reports it. It becomes part of the scenery, just like him. And then there's the annual Moon Festival parade. Crowds cheer, children laugh, drums thunder down the avenue. But just before the lion dancers reach the end of the route, they always pause, right at the intersection where Ong once stood every morning, rain or shine. For one long second, they lower their heads, a beat of stillness in the middle of chaos. No explanation, no announcement, but everyone feels it, even if they don't know why. Mainstream historical fact. San Francisco's Chinatown has one of the longest continuous traditions of community-run mutual aid societies, dating back to the mid-1800s. These groups were often headed by figures whose authority was earned, not granted. Many people still think that power must be visible to be real, but in Chinatown, it's what you don't see that shapes you. So what do you think? Can a community be guided by a whisper? Can leadership look like restraint? Can one man make an entire city pause without ever saying a word? Benny Ong didn't want to be remembered, but the city had other plans, and so he remains, not in stone, but in stillness. And so we come to the final corner. Not an ending exactly, just the last visible streetlight before the road disappears into fog. In the heart of Chinatown, time moves forward, but it doesn't always erase. It layers, like lacquer, like soot, like memory. And beneath those layers, Benny Ong still walks. There's a boy at Harmony House now, about 10. Doesn't speak much, draws a lot. One day, he sketches a man in a white jacket standing beneath a fire escape. When asked who it is, he shrugs. Saw him once. The staff chuckle. "Where?" "In the steam," he says, "by the bakery." They pat his head, tell him he has a good imagination, but the drawing, it gets pinned to the bulletin board, right next to the emergency contact list. A fire breaks out in a noodle shop near Stockton. Smoke billows fast, but everyone gets out. No injuries. When the fire chief arrives, he finds the fire extinguishers already used, the gas lines shut off, the elderly couple who own the shop wrapped in blankets, smiling, safe. The owners insist someone helped them out the back door, a man in a gray coat. But security footage shows no such figure, just the two of them exiting into the alley. Alone. Still, they insist. He said everything would be okay. A tech company opens a co-working space nearby. Clean, minimalist, all concrete and glass. They try to integrate with the neighborhood, host meetups, offer free coffee. At one such event, an old man sits in the back, listening silently. When asked if he wants to join the pitch contest, he shakes his head. "No need," he says, standing. "You already have too many people talking." And just like that, he's gone. Do you remember the tea house Benny visited once a week without fail? It was closed for years. But a new owner reopens it. Not flashy, not modern, just restored gently. She finds a single white envelope taped beneath the cash drawer. No money, no message, just a pressed camellia inside. She keeps it on the shelf behind her. No one's allowed to touch it. A journalist comes poking around again. Wants to write a full biography. Makes calls. Sends emails. Interviews former cops, former gang affiliates, community leaders. They all give polite smiles. One even says, "If you find him, tell him thanks." But the journalist never gets his story. He leaves with only a photo, blurry, black and white, maybe from the 60s. A man walking away from the camera, shoulders hunched, jacket flapping. Might be Benny, might not. Depends on how much you want to believe. At the listening bench, a couple sits in silence. They've been arguing for weeks about work, about money, about leaving the city. They say nothing for a long time, just sit. Eventually, the woman leans over and whispers, "Do you feel like we're being watched?" The man smiles, looks up at the street lamp. "Maybe," he says, but not in a bad way. Harmony House holds a candlelight memorial for an elder who passed. As they stand in silence, a light breeze picks up. No rain, no thunder, just one window swinging open on the second floor and staying open. No one closes it. They just let the wind pass through. Mainstream historical fact. Across many traditional Chinese communities, elders are believed to remain in the places they loved, watching, guiding, protecting. This belief isn't superstition. It's respect, codified into daily life. Many people still think Benny Yong simply vanished. But what if he didn't? What if he became part of the rhythm? What if leadership isn't measured by how loudly you speak, but by how quietly you're remembered? So what do you think? Was Benny Yong a myth, or was he something more rare? A man who knew exactly when to step forward, and exactly when to disappear. And now, we've reached the soft edge of the night. The city has settled. The lanterns sway gently in their places. Somewhere, a kettle whistles. Somewhere else, a door clicks quietly shut. In this neighborhood of layered stories, a man once walked without leaving footprints. Yet somehow, everyone still steps in rhythm with his silence. Maybe that's the point. Not all legacies need to roar. Some glide, like the hush of a late train, like the whisper of incense smoke curling around forgotten corners. Benny Ong didn't demand attention. He shaped the space where others could be better. And sometimes, that's the kind of guide we need most. So if your eyes are heavy now, if the world outside your window has dimmed, let yourself drift. Let the rhythm of old streets and paper lanterns fold around you like soft cloth. Let Benny's quiet steps echo just far enough to guide you safely into stillness. Because in a world that talks too loud, sometimes the strongest thing you can do is listen. Thanks for walking this path tonight. Rest well. You're safe now.